soon as the video is ready. I think we're good.
All right, well, we'll go ahead and call to order the Medford 2040 Vision Task Force meeting.
Oh.
I'm on mute. Let's try that one more time.
Yeah.
We'll go ahead and call to order the Medford 2040 Vision Task Force meeting. Thanks, everybody, for getting here an hour early. We've got a big agenda today. Lots of stuff to cover. Staff's going to push us through. Respectful of everybody's time. I keep muting myself. My computer's got a mind of its own. Eric, let's go a little bit out of sequence. I think, can we introduce the people who weren't here at the last meeting, and then we can go through the agenda as outlined and take it from there?
Mr. Chair, I would suggest actually we stick to the original schedule now, because two of the people who were
they're the two people that we're waiting for. All right, well then
so
I'm going to get out of the way and let you push along with your agenda then.
All right, sorry about that. Okay, well, welcome everybody to another exciting meeting with the Medford 2040 Vision Task Force. I want to cover some logistical stuff here at the beginning, and so hopefully everybody received their materials and they're ready to go. There's one piece of material that didn't go out this time because it went out last time, and that was the community profile. Actually, if I could just go off on a quick tangent here. Rachel, did you happen to send the new link to the Leland group folks?
There's a high likelihood I did not.
I think they're trying to get in. So I just wanted to, maybe you could see if you could reach them.
Yep, I'll get on it.
Okay, thanks. Sorry about that. What you got in your materials, we keep sending you new lists of task force members. That's because various things change, and so you can always look at the bottom of the page to see which is the most current task force list. We also sent you one that is only for task force distribution and staff, and that has contact information, because we figured that you folks might want to talk to each other between meetings, and so we want you to have the ability to connect with each other. The other thing I'd like to mention is that these are being recorded, so if you happen to miss a meeting, you then have the ability to go back and watch the meeting later on. We haven't got that up on the web yet, but as soon as there is a project website, which will be very soon, we will have the links for those videos on there, and you can go and check them out. I also wanted to point out one other thing that I sent out in the packet, and see if am I allowed to share? Let's see. Yes. Whoa, okay, that's not what I was sending out. There we go. So we sent out a one-page snapshot of the Medford 2040 timeline. And this is just to kind of help give you a perspective of all the different facets that are happening during the course of this next year on this project. And we have what we're referring to as the environmental scan that's pretty much done at this point. And we'll be wrapping up today with some information we're sharing. And then you have the core team meetings and the dates on there followed. And the core team, by the way, is your chair, vice chair, Brian, and myself and Seth and Rachel. And then we have the task force meetings and the public involvement schedule. So you can see when the different portions of public involvement are happening during the course of this project, and then the key dates when things are going to the council. So just wanted to give you that perspective. We've found that this is helpful with other groups in the past, so we put that together for your information.
Quick question.
Yes.
Eric or whoever Daniel might answer this question. Are there any limitations in terms of us, what we can talk to each other about or meet to talk about? Or is it just an open book?
It's a bit of a gray area. We can't be making decisions outside of a publicly noticed meeting because we're such a big group. If you talk to one or two people, in one-on-one conversations, I think that's certainly permissible. But we're not supposed to, get on a call and circumvent the public's ability to hear the substance of our discussions and our decision-making process. So I don't think we want to stifle it too much. So I think if you want to call and chat with me, that's perfectly great. Or if we see each other at another meeting and have an idea we want to bounce off each other, that's fine. That's certainly what we do in the core team meetings. So we've got 2 committee members on there, plus the city manager. We bounce ideas around. I think that's perfectly fine.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. In terms of today, looking at the agenda, we want to accomplish 3 or 4 things here. The first thing is as part of that environmental scan that we talked about at the beginning, which is basically developing that baseline from where we're starting here with this vision process. We wanted to share with you all the information that we've gathered to feed into that baseline, which includes the community profile, the community satisfaction survey, and then the stakeholder interviews. And so we're going to download all that with you today and give you a chance to ask questions and share some of your perceptions as well. Following that, one of the things that I talked about last week is the focus areas. If you recall, when we talked about the vision statement, we also talked about having focus areas, that there would be focus area statements that supported the overarching vision statement. And then from that would be derived the action plan. I have some proposed focus areas that I'd like to run by you and get your feedback on. And so we'll do that, followed by an update on the public involvement side of things. Given that we're about to go out to the community again, we want to share with you the things that we're asking of them to help feed this task force in terms of its discussions. But we also want to share some of the tools, including, you remember last week we had the logo. So that has come back. And we also want to share the website with you as it's currently designed, but not online yet. Following that, then we do have a Speakers Bureau training that Seth is going to do. If you recall, we are hoping that many or even all of you are going to participate in a Speakers Bureau to talk to various community groups about this process and to help elicit community feedback. And so Seth has prepared a training that kind of cover the topics that we would like to have you share with those groups. All right, and then after that, time permitting, we've got some time at the end to be able to have an open discussion and talk about anything and everything you ever wanted to talk about community visioning. So on that note, let's gonna see, okay, Carol has joined us. And so has Thomas. So I think, Daniel, I think we're ready to begin.
Yeah, just keep moving along. Sounds good.
All right. So last week, most of you had an opportunity to introduce yourselves, and but we have 3 new members, or not new members, but here for the first time. And we thought we would give them the opportunity to share the same things that you shared with the group. And when they get a chance to watch the video from the first meeting, they can hear what you said. For those of you, the 3 of you that we're introducing here, Brett, Tom, and Chris, and Carol. I'm sorry, it's Brett, Tom, and Chris. Is Chris here? Yes, he is. There he is. What we're going to ask you to do is introduce yourself just very briefly, who you are, what organization you're with, what interests you're representing on this task force, how long have you lived or worked in Medford, and one thing that you like about Medford without repeating what anybody else said before you in this meeting, and then finish this sentence. This process will be successful if. All right, do we have a volunteer to go first?
I'm happy to.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. I'm Brett Champion. I'm the superintendent of schools for the Medford School District. Shout out to board director Lilia Caballero. Hi, Lilia. I'm very excited. Marcy and I moved here July 1st of 2019. So we've been here, it's going to be 2 years starting July 1st. In terms of one thing we love about Medford is the sense of community. Obviously, that extends out beyond just Medford, but certainly the Valley and Medford specifically has a remarkable sense of community that you see whenever there's anything that there is a need. There are people who stand in the way trying to solve those needs, and it's a beautiful sense of community. I believe this process will be successful if we have a reasonable plan, a vision moving forward that allows for lots of voices to be heard and is communicated in an effective and meaningful way. Thank you. So glad to be part of this.
Thank you, Brett. Chris, you want to go next?
Yeah, absolutely. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Chris Pizzai. I'm the chief executive here at Providence Medford Medical Center. I have worked here 9 years. My wife is actually from Medford and went to Kennedy Elementary, went to North Medford. We did previously live up in the Portland area. It's great to get back here. We wanted to get back this way and raise our kids close to family. And I think that kind of speaks to the kind of community that we have. Just a great place to raise a family. And we really loved being here. It's kind of one of those towns that's small enough that you feel that sense of community, yet large enough to have some of the great services that we have here, and certainly a great jump off point for outdoor activities. And I think, in terms of being successful with this process, I think it was with any process, just I think assuming good intent amongst each other, making sure that we're transparent in our communication, and that we feel free to share ideas and our thoughts, and to be respectful as we're doing that.
Thank you. Tom?
Hello, I'm Tom Fisher. I work with Coldwell Banker Commercial, so I am a commercial real estate broker, and that I believe is why I was asked to be on this task force, just to get a focus from the commercial real estate point of view. My wife and I moved here a little over 15 years ago, and that is because the reason that we liked this Rogue Valley area, and why we do so today even more so, is that it does not have the high density, congestion, and traffic of Silicon Valley, where we spent 24 years prior to being here. So we're still very much enjoying that. I think this task force will be successful if we come out of this with action items that actually get done. I've seen a lot of previous plans for things, and there are lots of things in those that never seem to manifest. And hopefully we'll have things that are measurable and actionable. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, I'll turn it back to the chair.
Make sure I actually unmute myself correctly. So I think it goes over now to the community profile. So that was been previously distributed. Does everybody have a copy of the document to refer as we go through this? If you don't, raise your hand and somebody on staff will email it to you. Mr. Montero, anybody else? Okay, Eric, can you have somebody shoot that over to Mike?
Yeah,
And then you guys,
we'll send it over right now.
all right. So I don't know who has the slideshow, but take it away.
Okay, that will be me. I'll be presenting some of the slides. We're going to go a little out of order from the way that it's set up. So we're going to start with the comparison cities part. And I'm not sure if that was appended to the rest. But if it was, then it would be the last section. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. Okay, let's see. Okay, is this visible?
Yeah, we've got you.
All right, great. So if I make this full screen, this is my first time doing a Zoom screen share. So if I go to presentation mode, does it show up in presentation mode?
No, we've got just the slide in full
Okay,
screen.
perfect. Great.
Well
Okay.
done.
So the purpose, so I, along with Sam, who's also on this call, we're from Leland Consulting Group. So our purpose here was to provide some background data about demographics, economics, market conditions, just to kind of serve as a baseline base of data, just a little bit of knowledge going into the community planning process to, you could both use it as kind of a benchmarking metric, some data points, basis for discussion. I think as we go through this presentation, I guess the overarching question is, does this data confirm something you already know, or does it surprise you a little bit, and how? So we'll start with the comparison cities part. We heard a lot that the leadership in Medford is always trying to understand how does Medford stack up against similar cities, particularly similar cities in Oregon. So we pulled together some data for that. So we could talk about that. We chose 7 other cities just to do some comparisons, just to see where Medford kind of fits in or sticks out. And so these cities were selected basically based on their size as medium-sized cities. As you can see in the bubbles on the top, there's their area in square miles. They're all fairly similar with the exception of Reading, which is a little bit of an outlier. But Reading just must have a lot of additional square mileage that they're not using because their population is still very similar to the other cities. And so some of these cities you'll notice they're parts of a larger metropolitan area. So Hillsborough, Gresham, Kennewick are all parts of a larger metro area. And then some of these cities are standalone cities, more similar to Medford, such as Bend or Idaho Falls, and kind of serve as the little urban center in kind of a larger, less dense area. So we can see here that Medford falls right in the middle in terms of size. In terms of population, it actually falls on the low end, 83,000 residents. And then we have population density, though, is also right in the middle. So it's at 3,200 residents per square mile. It is right in the mid-range. And so then the question there is, are we happy with this density? Do we want to go denser? Do we think people want more density? And what does that look like? And so looking at these cities, even though right now they are somewhat similar in terms of population density, how they got here is actually pretty interesting because there's really 3 main groups. And so for reference, from 2000 to 2020, the population of the United States grew by 17%. So that's your nationwide average. So there's 2 cities that grew more slowly. So that's Yakima and Reading. And then you have a middle range of cities, which includes Medford, which grew more quickly than the national average, but not super on fire growing very rapidly, such as the cities at the top. So Bend, Hillsborough, Kennewick have all had to accommodate a lot more people in a very, well, not a very short span of time, it was 2 decades, but so we have kind of cities that would have 2 strategies right now. We have cities that are probably trying to stem population loss in some way, stem job loss, manage a stable city, and then we have cities that are trying to manage growth, in some cases very rapid growth, and that can create negative externalities that need to be managed. And so what's interesting about Medford is that it's in the managing growth category, but in some ways it's also managing losing certain types of population. So for example, the issue of brain drain came up a lot, and so there is some concern around losing certain types of residents, even though the city is growing. So then looking at these 2 metrics, which are median household income and median housing value, what's interesting about this, and this tells us something about cost of living. So for the most part, the cities are kind of in the order of, they stay in the same order. So cities with less median household income tend to have less median housing values. This is true if you look at the low end. Yakima and Idaho Falls are both on the low end in both, but flip-flopped. And then you see the same thing with Bend and Hillsborough on the high end, flip-flopped. What's interesting is if you look at where Medford's placed here, it's in the lowest 3 for median household income, but then it's right in the middle with median housing value. And it's the most dramatic difference of these cities, with the exception of Bend. I would say Bend is also pretty dramatic. So that's indicating that there's more of a mismatch between cost of living and what people are earning, which is something that we did hear over and over again. So this kind of shows that in the data. And so then we just took a look at a couple of social characteristics that we were told are 2 of the things that make Medford perhaps different from some other cities. And so one of these was the educational attainment. And so there was some concern that there was higher educational attainment in Medford. And it's actually it's similar to its peer cities, but at the lower end, not as high as Hillsborough and Bend, where a lot more people have a college degree, but it is in a peer group with the other 6 cities. And then another thing we heard was that there was a higher percentage of retirement age residents, and this would appear to be very true because it's number 1 in the proportion of residents over 65. So over 1 in 5 people are over 65, which is the highest of all of these cities. And so these, along with other social characteristics, can be important things to take into consideration with planning, since they can indicate that residents have different needs than might otherwise be expected. So this is the section where we just compare Medford to other cities. And now we're going to look at some Medford specific things as well. So that's in a different PowerPoint, which I will share momentarily. Does anybody have any questions or anything on that part?
I was just going to jump in real quickly, Jill. Hi, I'm Sam Brook. I'm Jill's colleague. I just wanted to highlight, in looking at some of these comparison metrics, it's really useful from an economic development perspective just to start to think about what some of those opportunities and constraints really are, what differentiates Medford, whether that's in housing, some of the population characteristics, as Jill mentioned, the pretty significant retirement community attraction. From the economic development perspective, you can start to look at business retention and recruitment efforts that are very much impacted by the level of educational attainment, and how Medford stacks up relative to these peer cities makes a huge difference, especially when you consider what drives economic development, what drives growth or expansion in certain industry sectors, real estate or otherwise. It's really about the people. And so educational attainment, the population base, and the age characteristics, how the cities are growing, all of those have huge implications. So just sort of high level, keep that in mind. That's really forms the basis and the goals, objectives of these kinds of studies. So with that, I'll throw it next to you.
Yeah, exactly. All these things have downstream effects on quality of life in one way or another. So, and it's all interrelated.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
The data that you're sharing, how old is it? Where did you get it? Where did you get the data?
So it comes from a combination of the US Census. So the most recent census, I'm trying to remember if the 2019 data was out when we prepared this, but it would be end year 2018 or 2019, which is normal, and the prior year. So the 2020 data will be available later this year. I think it comes out in September and December each year.
Okay.
So it's still a lag of about a year on that. And then we also use a vendor that can bring some of the data up to date using, I guess, it apportions it based on some kind of algorithm. But
okay. The concern, the numbers that you're giving about, education, people with more college degrees and everything. Did you take in consideration the universities at those cities versus what we have in Medford, the options that we have in Medford? One thing that we notice is that students go to universities, like let's say they graduate from here, they take off up north and they stay. Mm-hmm. So they don't come back here, unfortunately. They stay up there because of job opportunities and better pay and housing opportunity too. So I don't know if there's a way to see the reasoning behind the lower levels of education that higher education, obviously, that I don't see like it's a level field. Because obviously up north, there's a lot more options for higher education options where students can go.
Mm-hmm. True, and it does look at the population over 25, so it will exclude people who are currently in school. So it makes it a little bit more, a little more parity between communities with universities and those without. And yeah, it would be probably a combination of push and pull, things that push people out, and then things that pull people into other communities, like you said. So the presence of different opportunities elsewhere versus maybe a perceived lack of the same opportunities within Medford or something to that effect. And I'm not sure if that would be something that you would necessarily be able to get out of the census, whether or not they capture anything that has to do with those determinants, apart from the housing. Obviously, housing prices do play a role. Median pay, those sorts of things.
I'll jump in before I have to jump off for a bit. I want to thank you for including some cities that have also gone through the transformation from a primarily natural resource-based economy, right? Because Bend used to be a mill town, right? And some of those cities did rather better than others at advancing with the times and evolving. And, some of them are moving very quickly in the gentrification direction, and some are still dealing with higher percentages of poverty. For Bend, poverty is not one of the top 5 factors, their local electeds have to deal with, and in Medford it is. And so I just wanted to thank you for that really relevant spectrum of cities you chose.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So now I'll do the second half of this presentation, and we won't be able to go through everything, but I think I'm going to speak a little in depth about some of the housing data that we collected, since that seems to be the #1 issue, or at least from what I was hearing over and over again. So we did have some data relevant for that discussion. I'll go ahead and share my screen again. And then I was going to hop around a little bit in this one as well. So for the purpose, I split the city into 4 parts just to be able to make kind of a by area comparison. But this may or may not be how other people would split it up. So if not, I apologize for that, but I did it based on large roads and differences in that direction. So we have the central, west, east, and north sub areas. What's interesting is that the west, north, and east sub areas have similar populations, so between about 24,000 people and 28,000 people. And then the central sub area is its own thing. It is definitely less of a residential area, more of a business area, and has a much smaller population of residents and a much higher population of businesses. If you can call that a population, much higher concentration. And so the population trends is that the city has been growing throughout fairly even rate. The central sub area had the highest annual growth rate, but not by much. And also that's not as surprising because it had a lower population to start out with. So anything that happens there is going to look a little more dramatic in the numbers. So the city of Medford grew by about 1% annually every year between 2000 and 2020. So in actual number terms, what that means is that there were over 15,000 residents during that 20-year period, or about 770 new residents each year. So, and then also during this time, about 1/3 of the county's population growth took part in Medford. And this growth is projected to continue. Over the next 30 years, there will be an average annual additional residents, this is on average each year, of over 1,000 per year. And so actually this is more of a curve because you'll see fewer in near-term years and then more in later term years since it's a % increase. So in the next 10 years, it will work out to be about 900 residents per year on average. And so how do we accommodate these residents in this growth? And so looking at what the average household size is, taking these 900 or so residents, 1,000 residents each year over 30 years, that is about 415 households. So that's 415 families or single persons who will be needing a housing unit. And so this was the big issue that we heard over and over again, is that there's just simply not enough housing units to accommodate people right now, and that the price of those housing units as a result is going up much higher than people's ability to afford those. And so just looking at these population numbers and the number of households, we can estimate that the city will need to add about 435 additional housing units annually just to keep pace with this growth. And the reason that it's a little bit higher than the number of new households is that this builds in 5% vacancy, which is the normal healthy vacancy for housing units, which is needed for people to be able to vacate one house and move to another one, or to do maintenance on apartments or things of that nature. Have to have a certain amount empty at any given time. So we're going to skip ahead then to talk a little bit about housing unit production. And so we were given the housing permits database from January 2015 through September 2020. So that's about 5.5 years of data from the last 5.5 years. And so we compared that with the growth in population, and we found that from 2015 to 2020, Medford grew by approximately 4,000 households, which when you add in that buffer for vacant housing units, comes out to 4,200 housing units. So just to keep pace with that 5-year growth, there should have been 4,200 housing units added. And so then we took a look at what was actually added from this housing permit data, and we found that during the same time, just over 1,400 housing permits were issued, and then 90 units of multifamily housing were built. So this is about 1,500 units, which means that there was an approximate 2,700 unit gap between supply and demand. So to put that in monthly terms, we had about 21 housing permits issued per month on average. But in order to keep pace with the growth that occurred, we would have needed to see something like 57 units per month on average over the same time. And then one alarming trend in the data is that despite this need, the number of housing permits has actually trended downward over the past 5 years. So this issue has become more dramatic over time rather than less dramatic. And also what it means is that as the city continues to add population, that not only will there be this continued need for 57 or whatever the number may be housing units per month, maybe slightly more, there's also going to be this kind of backlog of need from all of the ones that weren't created over the past 5 years. So really the housing need is going to be much higher, you know, perhaps the 57 and then plus the 30 or so that are missing here per month. And then, but we do see, you know, for example, we have the population, it just trends up forever. But we also know that maybe at some point it does become too expensive or people do become discouraged and maybe they would have moved to Medford, but instead they're going to maybe look elsewhere, change their plans. So this can be the type of thing where it doesn't escalate infinitely, but people do begin to respond to these conditions as well. So we could see it slow down. That's also a possibility. But yes, and then we also see that the last estimate I saw said that between 2,400 and 2,700 housing units were lost in the wildfires over the summer. So this puts additional pressure on housing within Medford because so many people lost housing in such a dramatic amount. And a lot of that housing was also kind of the naturally affordable housing, the modular housing, mobile homes, and that sort of thing. So then we'll just talk about this slide and then we can move on to our discussion. So this shows, the map on this slide shows the location of these housing permits. And as we can see, a lot of it took place on the periphery of this city, which is very normal. And then a little bit of infill closer in, which is always good to see. And then we see that the east sub area saw the greatest amount of building activity with about 660 total permits. And we also see that the east sub area had the highest value of permits. And so, these permits, this is the value of the house that they were going to build. And then one rule of thumb we use is that the value of the land accounts for about 20% of the value of the finished home or the cost. And so you can actually add on about 1/4 of this value of the permit to the permit to estimate what the final value of the house would have been. So for these homes that are $275,000 on average in the east sub area, that's probably a land price of around $70,000. So we're talking about homes that when they're finished, they're in the $340,000 to $350,000 range. And so what sticks out to me from that is when we're talking about housing affordability is that it's already priced out of range. This new housing unit is outside of the range of households that have fewer resources. And this is actually pretty normal. Throughout history, new housing has always been kind of limited to people who could afford it. But what happens is, and then we see that the existing housing kind of filters down, it gets older, it gets less valuable, and that's kind of where lower and middle income households find housing. But what happens is when you have this pipeline that's only producing a lot of larger suburban single family housing, and you don't have a pipeline that's producing also all those other smaller townhome units, smaller houses, smaller footprint houses, kind of the way that used to happen more in the past, then eventually you lose that ability where it's filtering down where people can find starter houses, because eventually the market's overloaded with larger, higher value new houses, especially if you're doing a lot of building all at once. You will have a lot of houses, but they're all going to be like 10 years old, so they're still going to be pretty expensive. So there are some interventions, and there's all kinds of interventions that cities work on to try to make housing be more affordable, because it's always a little bit of a dilemma, because all of the housing is delivered mostly by the private sector, and then the public sector just has to attempt to guide that through things like zoning or incentives, or density bonuses, or streamlining permitting for housing that they feel better meets the community's needs. So those are some of the things we see that different cities do to try to balance out their housing in a way that kind of helps make it more affordable for everyone. So I think I'm going to go ahead and stop there, unless we want to look at any of these other slides.
Are there questions for Jill? That's a lot of information to digest. I don't know if there's anything super surprising to those of us who've been involved in the community a long time, but does anybody want to question or comment or have any discussion on that community profile piece?
Daniel?
Yeah.
I guess at this point, our task is to look forward into the future a long time, keeping in mind that each individual city tends to look at its own problems on its own. The collective impact, though, of what happens in other communities outside Medford affects our situation dramatically. And I'm wondering if our consultants have any words of wisdom for us as we try to understand the dynamics of how people may settle in Eagle Point or Central Point or Phoenix or Talent as they're reworking things. How do we collectively plan as a region, paying attention to what Medford's needs are, but how on earth do we keep the variables manageable?
I don't know if anyone else wants to take a crack at that. I feel like cities are a little bit, sometimes they do have their hands tied, because in a lot of ways they're responding to things that are happening outside of their borders, or in some cases are happening nationwide. So it's less of a matter of, it's being proactive, but it's also really just having to react and respond to things that you may not have too much control over. And so then it becomes, what are the possible things that could happen, and how could we be prepared for a range of outcomes? And yeah, I mean, who could have foreseen this whole past year? So for me, it's just kind of knowing what works and knowing what has worked. There are some strategies that are pretty foolproof when it comes to city planning for the future, looking towards the future. So that's kind of my non-answer answer.
I think to get to Al's question, look, for the work of this committee is, do the characteristics that you see in Medford's housing supply, both on the supply and demand sides, does that align with the rest of the county? Are we significantly out of balance compared to the rest of the county? I mean, if we look at the county as a whole, is there a disproportionate oversupply of single family housing versus, multifamily, or does that kind of tie to it? Because I think Al's jumping ahead and saying, all right, as we start writing policies, we need to look at the housing supply for the whole valley, not just what's in the corporate limits of Medford. So I don't know if you guys have any data on that, but I could see that being useful information for the committee. Mr. Montero.
Yeah, Jill's data is correct. So if you look at the disproportionate level of vacancies available, It just reflects what she just said. One item to flag in this whole process is that the land available throughout the valley required a 13-year-long process through Oregon's land use process just to make available urban reserve lands, followed by a ongoing, but in city of Medford's case, 2-year process of bringing land into the urban growth boundary to make it available for annexation. That said, and there has been a couple of comments over the last 2 weeks from different members of this task force that provide that what should come with this plan is some way to implement the vision. So the issue for making that land available for actual urbanization has to do with the region's financial ability to meet development of the category A facilities, as sewer, water, and roads. In other words, if you're going to put more stress on the system, you've got to have to plan to pay for mitigating the stress. And that's going to be one of the biggest challenges that we have here that's leading to much of what you've described as the challenges in your data, Jill.
Other comments?
Yes, I do agree with Daniel that we didn't do a comparison of the city within the context of the greater county. So we didn't line those numbers up side by side, but that would be very useful data to have moving forward to understand what is Medford's role within its broader region, and then also what's its competitive advantage or also its competitive disadvantage, to kind of understand what's a more likely success strategy moving forward.
Yeah, because we are big enough that we do move the whole market. You know, we're a big player when you look at the county, and we're also impacted by everybody else. Going to Mike's point, I think as we start talking about strategies, you know, housing is a market. We can attack it on the supply side or the demand side. We have worked really hard the past 2 decades to maximize supply, and I don't know if there's a lot more that we can do there. I mean, I think a lot of us on here have been involved in the land use process and trying to get more buildable land. We're at capacity for state statute. So I think when we start looking out over the next 20 years, at least in my opinion, we have to look at, you know, how can we get it so that people can afford the housing that we are allowed to build. So that's a huge overgeneralization, and there's a lot of nuance in that, but that's my opinion on that. Are there any other questions for Jill on the stuff she just presented? And if not, we'll roll forward to the other 2 data sets that we have. So the way this meeting is structured, we're digesting a lot of data. We're going to take a break, and then we're going to have some commentary on you know, how we want to start narrowing it into actionable items. So seeing nobody raising their hand, let's go down to the the satisfaction survey. So who's got? Is that Seth?
That'll be me.
All right.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel.
Take it away, Seth.
Okay, now I'm gonna share my screen. Oh, looks like Jill needs to stop sharing. There we go. Thank you. Give me one moment. Okay, everybody sees my screen okay? All right, and Daniel, I'd appreciate your help. If there are questions in the middle of the survey, that's great, but I can't see everyone on the screen, so if you can help me.
I'll keep an eye out for you.
Thank you.
Just wave at me, somebody, you know.
Great. So we worked with KJ at the city of Medford to do a community satisfaction survey. So the questions here were really to see what people are thinking about Medford in general, so that we can understand where we are and before we start looking ahead and know where we want to go with the vision process. So the questions weren't exactly geared towards the vision process, although we did talk about it a little bit as we were sharing the information. They're mostly just to get a pulse on how people were doing with the community and some general feedback. I do want to make it clear that this wasn't a scientific survey. We just tried to share it broadly with all the audiences we knew we wanted to reach. And then we compared that again, some of the demographic data we have in the city to see if we're reaching those audiences that we talked about in the community engagement plan. And again, this was early, so this is a really good opportunity to test those tools and see which ones we need to adjust to meet our outreach goals as we start the next survey, which will focus more on the vision statement. So we got 1,150 people to complete the survey, which was pretty good. The completion rate was 78%, which I thought was pretty high, considering that most of our questions were open-ended. They weren't just little multiple choice easy answers to pick. And the typical time people spent on this was 9 minutes, 44 seconds, so almost 10 minutes. So people who took the survey either cared about it and really wanted to complete it, or they were motivated by the prize that we supplied, which was I think a $50 gift card to Amazon. So either way, we're really glad they spent the time on it and that we got as many surveys as we got. So some of the ways we used to distribute the surveys, we shared it on the City of Medford's website. And so people who subscribe to the website would also get an email to say that there's something new. There's a news piece and they could read it. KJ started a new city e-newsletter and she shared it that way with folks who are subscribed there. And she's also done a follow-up e-newsletter to let people know that the survey was done. We posted some social media advertisements on Facebook and Instagram, which I don't have this data, but I suspect that most of our respondents came in through social media. So that's something to think about in the future. We had a news release and I saw at least one news outlet in the region did share our news release. And KJ can speak up if there were more. We shared with our community partners, which included you here in our task force. So thank you very much for helping get the word out. And we had a number of others who we worked with. Lilia was a great help and she did some specific outreach to our Latino population and Spanish speaking community members. And I think Lilia even went on the radio and talked about the survey in Spanish. So thank you, Lilia. And we shared the survey internally with City of Medford staff. So we wanted to know what city employees thought about the city too, and make sure that their input was heard. I want to just pause and see if KJ has anything else she wants to add about our distribution tools.
Thanks, Seth. I'll be really quick. We're really excited that we got as many respondents as we did. Throughout this process, we want to build that though, and build on our specific audiences. And Seth will go through that, I think, in a little bit in some of the summaries. But we think it's a good start. We got a lot of feedback from the public, which was really exciting, and that they're excited about this process and they want to be engaged. So we got quite a few of subscribers to the e-newsletter. And then we also asked through the survey if they wanted updates on the process, and we had over 300 people say yes on that. So that starts a really good audience that are already clued in and that they're interested in this process. So we're pretty excited about it.
Thanks, KJ. So just to let you know who we heard from before we get into the answers, as far as gender, for some reason, we had more females than males take the survey. So that's something to think about. Medford is closer to 50-50 in gender. And so we got 66% female. But I was also happy to see we had other genders participate too, at least one transgender person and a handful of non-binary folks. Respondents by age, it's typical, usually in civil processes, that we hear from folks who are in their 40s or older, and that's reflected here. So I think we have some work to do to get younger people more involved, especially since this is a long-term visioning process and it's their future that we're talking about. Race and ethnicity was surprisingly consistent with what the community profile found. So I will say that in my experience, usually white people are less likely to complete this information, so that could skew the results. But almost all the races were reflective of Medford's population, with the exception of Pacific Islanders. I think it's closer to 1%. We got a half percentage point. And then for ethnicities, Latino Hispanic was definitely under represented. It should be closer to the 10% range. And so we have some work to do to make sure we get the Latino response up. As far as language, most people spoke English, and we know that there's a higher percentage of Spanish speakers in Medford that we want to try to reach. And I will note that we had an option that said other or multiple, and most of the responses for other or multiple were English and Spanish. So this was around 4% or 5% for Spanish, but we know it should be higher. We asked about housing situations, and Leland can probably speak to this better than me, but I think the ratio of people who rent and own homes should be closer together so we could reach more people who rent their homes. And we have specified that we want to reach people who don't have a permanent housing situation. And this did surprise me that we got 3%. I'll say typically if I don't make a considered effort to reach people who are houseless, it's usually close to the 1% range. So I think this probably reflects what Leland was talking about earlier, that the fires have displaced a lot of people and they might not be in a permanent situation right now. Income levels in Medford is pretty evenly distributed. And so the lower income was underrepresented. So we'll have to do some more work to reach those folks. And then we asked people what their relationship is to Medford, because we don't want to just reach people who reside in Medford, but also the folks who live elsewhere and work here or find services here. And so this is just for our information, but 73% of folks lived in Medford, and using math, we estimated that 27% of our respondents don't reside in Medford. They didn't select that option, but they did select one of these other options of working in Medford or going to school, visiting for recreation or other entertainment services down below. And then I thought this was interesting. Over half of the respondents have lived in Medford for more than 20 years. So I think that may speak to how long people stay here and how much people love the community. And but I don't have data to compare this to, so I would love your perspective that this is so much higher than folks who have been here for a shorter period of time. So getting into the survey itself, we asked people to use words to describe Medford. And I've arranged these in the ones that came up most often. So on the left here, I think you'll see there's some interesting duality in the ideas people have about Medford. One of them is growing, homeless, beautiful, dirty, and friendly. That's followed by potential. I think that the city has lots of potential, that it's a home, that it's community, that it's small. And we did see drugs come up quite a lot in the comments, as well as crime, that it's too expensive, that's a busy place, that it's boring, and that it's safe. So these are just words that come to mind when people think about Medford. So as we're thinking about what we want Medford to be like, this is what people think about it now. And so which of these things we want to keep and which of these things we want to address in some way. We did ask people to take a multiple choice question for how satisfied they are, or how they would rate the quality of life in Medford. And the majority were somewhere in the middle. So about 67% said that they were satisfied or felt better about their quality of life in Medford. There was a good chunk that said that they were less than satisfied. And then just a handful who said they don't know or had another response to offer. But they offered some positive and negative statements about the quality of life in Medford. Some of the things that we heard in the last slide, like beautiful area with recreation, good medical care, full service, city with a small town feel. There's shopping and local businesses, and there's a good sense of community, which I think are a lot of things that I've heard you folks talk about here already. Some negative sentiments about Medford is the presence of drugs, homelessness, and littering. Racism and political differences, high rent and high cost of living relative to income, road safety and traffic, and the lack of diversity in Medford. We asked folks to talk about what the greatest challenges to the quality of life in Medford are and ideas to address those things. And so again, homelessness, crime, and drugs came up, affordable housing, cleaning up litter, addressing challenges on the transportation system, addressing political division, which I think we can agree is a national issue too. Managing the growth of the city, and air pollution, I think mostly talking about the wildfires and air quality due to wildfires. Ideas they had to address these challenges were creating rehabilitation and drug treatment centers, using law enforcement and a jail, finding funding and doing a budget audit to make sure that funding is used effectively, creating affordable housing and transition homes, and incentivizes businesses for better paying jobs. And I think that does speak to that gap that Jill showed us in that last presentation. So I did ask my staff to take a look at the comments of communities of color specifically and see if they were very different from respondents who identified as white, if only because there were so many white respondents that we wanted to know if there was anything being lost in that analysis. And in a lot of ways, they were well aligned with the white respondents, but they were more likely to bring up topics of social equity. And the comments we have here is the need to address systemic racism and white supremacy, which again is a national topic, but is also here present in Medford. There are comments that diversity is not celebrated or welcome in Medford, that there are few resources for people who are not white, heterosexual, or cisgender. And there's a sense that positions of community influence are largely held by white people. And so I just wanted to pull those out for your awareness. And again, I have the full report that I'm happy to export and share with you if any of you want to look at the comments in general, but these are the comments that rose to the top as we were looking through everything for this summary. We asked respondents how they want to receive information, and they said, a lot of them said on a website using social media. And I think we have to consider that I suspect that most of our respondents came through social media. And so of course, the folks we heard from want to continue getting information that way. So we can keep doing that, but I think we'll want to continue having a range of options. Email, television news, the Mail Tribune, a newsletter, and things become less digital as we go down the line. So again, I think that reflects how we heard from people. Okay, are there any questions I can address or discuss about the survey?
Questions for Seth? Awfully quiet. All right, thanks, Seth.
Thank you.
We're gonna do one more set of data before our break. So we'll pivot now over to the interviews and surveys from the community leader panel. So who's got, is that you, Eric? Were you the one that quarterbacked that?
That would be me.
All right.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, so as Daniel said, this is the last piece of group of data coming in to establish this baseline. And we did a series of stakeholder interviews to try and get some more qualitative information with regard to where is Medford at right now. And so I'm going to share a little bit of that. And you also got the report. So this will be a little repetitive of the report, but it will also have share some additional insights from that. So I'm going to share a screen here, and it's not this one. Oops. There we go. Let's see if I can get this to perfect. Okay, so get the right keyboard here. I've got two keyboards going at the same time. All right, so as I said, this was part of the baseline development. We interviewed 20 individual people, including members of the city council, community leaders from a variety of different interests and perspectives, and some key city staff, including Brian, and KJ, and Lilia. And a few of you on the task force were actually participants in the interviews as well. So the key topics that we looked at in the interviews, we were asking about the current Medford. What are the current strengths, the challenges, the gaps, the opportunities that Medford is experiencing from this particular group of stakeholders? And then in terms of the future, what is the preferred vision that they have at this early stage, and what are some early ideas that they might have to contribute at this early stage? The results are presented as a collective. We don't talk about what individual people said. And the results are not a consensus, but rather a general theme or a majority of what majority of folks have said. One of the things that we look at when we do these stakeholder interviews is we cover a number of different areas, but we also try to see where there are threads of themes that kind of go across the different areas that we've asked about. And in this particular set of interviews, we came up with 9 themes that we saw out of these interviews. So the first is just the potential. I mean, the word potential was used in almost every interview. The interviewees see a great potential for Medford in terms of an opportunity to raise all boats, for Medford to be able to move forward in a way that is inclusive, for Medford to be able to build on the foundations of success that you've had to date, be it economic or be it livability. The second theme that we heard was geography, and there was a lot of emphasis on geography from a couple of different standpoints. Geography was brought up in the sense of an economic asset, because you're in a beautiful, beautiful area, and it attracts tourism, attracts people to the region, to the city, and but in addition to the tourism aspect of it, it is also a hub of activity for the region, for a number of counties, as some people pointed out, where people can come and get services or go shopping and get things that they cannot get locally. But also geography is an economic boon from the standpoint of, and many people brought this up, of the standpoint of being a midpoint between the California, whether Bay Area, LA kind of areas, and the Seattle, Portland areas, and that there's an opportunity there that Medford has from an economic standpoint. Livability is also brought up just because of the beautiful landscape that you have, the opportunities for outdoor activities, and the climate. And a number of people brought up the climate in Medford, and you don't get the rain that we see up here in Portland quite as much. Third item on the theme list was inclusivity. And pretty much everybody recognized that there is an inclusivity issue in Medford. Not an intentional one, but that the way the system has kind of played out in recent years, you see the usual suspects involved in the community, the usual suspects that are down at City Hall or involved in community initiatives. And so what people were saying is you really need to A, recognize that, and B, if you're going to strengthen the community and build a greater social fabric and build a greater economy, you need to be able to to expand and be more inclusive of the community that is there. Lack of housing supply. Some of this stuff is not going to be a surprise to you folks. So a little bit of this is just going to be preaching to the choir, but the lack of housing supply and affordability is an impediment for both livability and for economics. And if your workforce can't live in Medford, it makes it difficult to maintain your workforce and to attract people. But also it's problematic from the standpoint of can they afford to be there at different income levels? And you've got different income level groups that are looking for housing, and are you able to address all of those? Fifth is homelessness, and this is true for so many cities across the United States. Homelessness, people recognize as a challenge. One of the things that was brought up as part of this, though, is that people are perceiving that there's a community shift in terms of the perception of the plight of homelessness. And so that is seen as a positive, and that the city has made some initiatives in that regard, but it's still pervasive, and it's still going to be something that you're going to have to grapple with as part of the visioning process, in either taking into consideration or trying to figure out how to address it. Oops, other way. Oh. Then there was this interesting perspective, a thematic that went through the interviews, and that is a low expectations mindset within the community. There is a sense that the community in Medford has a low threshold of expectation in terms of what can be accomplished, that they're not dreaming big, the community is not being aspirational or feeling like they can be aspirational. And so that is seen as a hurdle by a number of the people that we interviewed, that not insurmountable, but being able to change that mindset as part of this process is going to be important. To say, yes, you can dream big. Yes, you can set your standards high, and we can get there. Seventh, just in terms of economic development, the feeling is that there needs to be a comprehensive approach. Not one aspect of economic development is going to get you where you want to be, but rather you need to have the combination of things, being able to bring in family wage jobs, workforce training that's targeted to your employers, being able to incentivize investment downtown, and making other livability enhancements that's going to attract workforce to Medford to want to live there and to be there. Downtown revitalization came up a lot, and the general sentiment here is that it is integral to the any economic plan that you have moving forward. And then finally, recreational activities are seen as a foundation for moving forward in Medford, because you have such a strong focus on recreation from a number of standpoints, whether it's the outdoor activities that are attracting tourism, or whether it's the livability for the community, park system, or the sports focus that Medford has had in recent years. And a number of people called out the Rogue Credit Union Community Complex as an example of how Medford is really sort of putting a stronghold in that area. So breaking this down just a little bit more, we asked people to describe Medford in 3 words. And these were the words or variations of these words that came up. And you'll see that Seth's presentation mirrored some of this as well. Beautiful is probably the word that I heard the most in the interviews. Potential. We talked about that in terms of a thematic, but that there is so much potential, and people are just very positive about that. Home, that people see this as a place that's home for a longer period of time. Center from the standpoint of what I was talking about geographically earlier on, in terms of being a midpoint, in terms of being a regional hub, and then family, that this is a place that you want to raise families. We asked about strengths, and these are the things that came up multiple times. Location, the infrastructure, that you've done a great job in terms of infrastructure and infrastructure funding, healthcare, the city staff and leadership was brought up a number of times, and awareness of the plight of the homeless. Again, a more sensitivity in terms of the homelessness plight, partnerships in the region, and of course the Rogue Community College in Southern Oregon College as well were also brought up multiple times. So challenges we asked about for current Medford, and how these are no surprise to any of you, I'm sure. Housing, homelessness, lack of family wage jobs, fires and air quality, underutilized downtown, good enough mindset. That's what, going back to the low expectations piece, substance abuse and mental health issues, the brain drain of the kids who are growing up in Medford and then they go to college and they don't come back, and a lack of visionary leadership. In terms of future Medford, we asked people what they wanted to keep and make sure that's part of Medford's future going forward. The sports focus came up a lot, parks, wine industry, healthcare as a regional service, sense of community, arts and culture, and the long-term employers like Harry and David and Lithia and Bear Creek and so forth. So we then switched gears and we talked about, well, what is your preferred vision? And these are the things that were brought up more than once. The vibrant downtown, more recreational opportunities and parks to build on that foundation, to have the community have a multi-generational focus that is attractive to multiple generations and supports multiple generations. Economic diversity, diversifying that economic base to be more resilient. Family wage jobs, diverse housing options. Bear Creek came up a lot in terms of really being able to enhance that area and utilize that area better. Higher ed for workforce training, fire mitigation, third places. And somebody asked me about third places the other day, and I realized we haven't defined it. So if you aren't familiar with that term, this came up a lot in the Hillsborough vision. The first place is where you live. The second place is where you work. And the third place is where you go to gather with other people and they interact. And third places can be parks or churches or Starbucks or any number of places that you interact with other people. And so there was a call for more third places. Inclusivity across the community, transportation connectivity, and focus on the image of Medford, changing the image from Medford, which came up in a number of interviews, and doing branding to change that image. So with that, hopefully I've stayed relatively on time. Do you have any questions at the moment with regard to what we found?
Eric, this is Bill Thorndike, and actually I wasn't fast enough on my mouse. It actually goes back to Seth. Seth, I think one of the interesting things, at least I experienced it myself, again, is some of these new vehicles that are used to communicate with communities and neighborhoods. And the two that I'll cite, one is the nextdoor.com phenomenon. So again, I belong to a next door community. I live outside of Medford, but it's really interesting watching how community members are using that to ask, where can I get my gutters fixed? Or I want to walk my dog with somebody, and again, it's a different type of social network. I think there's like 30 of them set up in the Rogue Valley right now. So, but to me, that's it's new. It's a different way of communicating with folks. The other thing is some of these accumulators. So like I have Newsbreak. And Newsbreak allows me, they know where I live. And so they the news that comes out, I get local news, I get statewide news, I get national, international news. But it just seems like we're seeing some really different vehicles out there beyond the traditional Mail Tribune and television stations as to how we're getting information. And so I just add that as, again, I think it's a real opportunity for us to maximize some of these newer ways of communicating.
Thanks, Bill. I really appreciate that. And I welcome other ideas too. We definitely talked about Nextdoor as we were doing this. I've been trying to figure out the best way to leverage Nextdoor as a professional for like the last 5 years. And they really focus on community, which is great. But what it means is that you need most of the time an insider who actually lives within the area to share that and then see if they can get it to catch on fire. So for all of you who live in Medford and have a Nextdoor account, I would encourage you to share our messages and our surveys on your Nextdoor accounts. And yeah, when it takes off in Nextdoor, I've had surveys that reach 50,000 responses easy.
Thanks, Seth. What I was going to do at this point before we go to a break is transition into a broader discussion about everything you've heard this morning in terms of the download. And we wanted to find out, does this information resonate with you? What other comments, like Bill brought up, what other comments would you have in addition to those? So I'm going to exercise my facilitator privilege here and ask everybody to please put yourself back on screen so I can watch you and know when you're raising your hand or falling asleep. And also, and it was in your guidelines and expectations that you adopted too. So anyway, so with that, yes, the Vice Chair, did you have Christina? Oh, I thought I saw your hand go up. Al.
You're right, Daniel, a lot to digest. But I wanted to talk about 2 or 3 things, especially related to Eric, your presentation. I'm a little sensitive, having been active around here for over 50 years in a number of areas. When we use terms like usual suspects, it's a rather pejorative term, and I, for one, am fairly sensitive about its use. I understand what people are getting at in terms of trying to make it a more inclusive leadership style and openness, but I think it would be good if we avoid implicit or explicit criticisms of what's gone on in the past. Because when you talk about visionary leadership in this community, and I'm sure Bill maybe feels about this, people don't talk about the fact that early on in our communities, we built a water system, which Daniel's familiar with, that is amazing. And we have a tremendous history of doing amazing, creative, collaborative things. And it's time for us to build on that for a future vision. But I think when we start using ideas like somehow we have low expectations, I haven't noticed that while I've lived here. In fact, I think we've had great expectations and we've overachieved in many areas. I'm not going to express a litany of them, but they're there. I don't know, I guess that's enough for now.
Just to clarify a little bit here. First of all, what we heard from folks is overall very positive in terms of Medford and as a community. The second is when we're doing these interviews, we're just messaging what we heard, and that term came up quite a bit. I think your point is well taken, though, that about how it's perceived and going forward, how this group will proceed in terms of its usage of terminology. Other comments? Mike?
Yeah, going along with Al's comment, one thing that we've seen particularly effective on the transportation side, and I'm not focusing it on transportation, but sometimes people become complacent and maybe a little discouraged because they see the valley as it's always been this way. And so oftentimes what can be very useful is to celebrate some of the things that have been done. And I'm thinking about like the sports park. It's fine, it's there, it's wonderful, we all use it. Probably few understand how that happened. And it doesn't mean it's the way we should always do it, but if we use examples that the public generally understands and then help them to appreciate how the sense of community went about achieving those, that can sometimes be the launch pad for other efforts.
Okay. Great.
Eric, do you ever do a backcasting component when you put together these plans where you say, look, here's what we've achieved, just very high level, you know, the last 20 years, some major achievements we've made and how those set the framework for the next 20 years that you're forecasting? Or is that counterproductive?
We typically haven't done that in the past, mostly because we're looking forward. But if you're looking to set a context for the vision and to have that part of the vision, there's nothing wrong.
I don't know that it needs to be included in the printed document. I just think, to Al's point and to Mike's point, it might be worth bringing up in our discussion as we hammer out the areas that we want to focus on. So it was just a question.
Okay. Other comments, observations? Did that resonate, other than what Al and Mike have brought up, did that resonate with you? I'm seeing some head nods. Carol?
Yeah, I wanted to piggyback on a couple comments before we went through those stats from the two gals about the demographics here and the opportunities that seem to be not apparent to those who do get college educated. Certainly anecdotally for my kids in their 30s, they got educated and said if they weren't in medicine and or service industries that we have here with the mega hotels and all that, there was nothing here for them. And in one of the commissions that I serve on for the city, Bend was actually one of the models that seems to have handled well attracting the educated, college educated population, as well as living well with the older population. And they have a great model. Apparently, we've looked at it quite a bit for the underserved and even those without homes. So it would be worth maybe looking a little bit more even at their model so that we can get more tech companies in, more companies that require upper degree education to have a balanced of our population.
Okay, all right, we'll capture that. Great. Other comments, thoughts? Marta.
Yeah, I'd like to crosswalk one of the observations about the community or trends not thinking big and not thinking boldly to even the housing discussion we had in the first data set and in the second one. I personally have observed in housing discussions over the last 4 years and some economic development discussions that legacy self-limitation, you know, we know what needs to be done. Oh, but can we do it? And I'm not saying that's the right way to go, but why doesn't a group like the city say, yeah, usually cities are not landlords, but what if? You know, usually housing authorities play in that space, but what if? What if the city becomes a leader on poverty elimination, right? What if the city's economic development program becomes better than Ben's, right? We haven't actively pursued it because I believe people don't dream that way around here, and that's weird. And I also see the potential, and I was getting goosebumps when you were saying everybody's talking about potential. Also, one more thing, we talk about homelessness. Sometimes I wish we spoke more about what else we can do to support our unhoused neighbors. It's a different paradigm shift. Homelessness is a socioeconomic factor, it's a phenomenon. But what's the problem? Is the problem that our neighbors are not housed. So just, I wish to see the discussion maybe approach that more humanely, personally.
Okay, thank you. That's a good point to bring up as we move forward with these discussions. So other comments before we take a break?
Hey, Eric, this is Lydia. Just it is not a comment, it's just a correction on my spelling of my last name. You have it there on the last page, the city staff, Lilia Cabarello. It's almost, but not quite. So
almost got it. All right.
Caballero. It's just like I spell it over here on my picture, right there, right there. Thank you.
Okay, great. Sorry about that, Lilia. We try to be very careful about that. For somebody who has a first name that's often misspelled, I try to be sensitive about that, but thank you. We will make sure that's corrected. Yes, and Milo, your microphone's off. Yeah, Milo, your microphone's off.
I got it. Okay, yeah, next time I'll use my own email. As you can see, and I understand more. My name is not Kelly Salgado, that's my wife. Don't change my name.
Okay.
Okay, but it's a good beginning, you know, where to start, when to start, you know. The overview that you're giving us of the community response is, you know, is a reality. And I'm glad people are bringing back that there's been other successes, but there's for sure, there's a reason why they came up with this new visioning: to practice, to react, to contribute, and you tell us when. I think at this point we're reacting to it. I like it to be proactive and inclusive, of course, and I like the different participation that I see. Of course, not enough jobs in the area, not enough employers, not enough workers for the employers that we have in the area at this point, several reasons. So I think there's a lot to review, and housing is a big problem, as we can see, and it's going to be related to jobs. And so we'll practice and contribute a little more as we come along.
All right, thank you very much. Any other comments quickly? Or? No. All right.
Caffeine, so I'm ready for a break.
Yep. Okay, back to you, Chair.
I already woke up. No, just kidding.
So that was a lot of information. Good job to all the consultants. I'm really happy with that. I think it actually does resonate with our general understanding. When we come back, we're going to get into actually how do we want to attack this. From a policy level perspective, where do we want to focus? Eric has been kind enough to set up some straw man focus areas that we get to hack apart and tell him how he doesn't understand anything. So that's where we're going to really earn our salaries on this is, you know, getting to tell the consultants they don't understand what they're doing. So let's take a 10-minute break. I'm going to go get some more caffeine so I can be charged up for the policy discussion. We'll be back at 2:45-ish.
Hey, Eric, while everybody's getting off, I was also interviewed for the interviews. Jill actually did my interview, and it's not a biggie. It's just that I want to some of the comments, I'm like, oh, I said that. So just FYI.
Actually, Brett, there were 2 sets of interviews. And so the folks that were doing Leland's group that was doing the community profile had their own set of interviews.
That
So
makes
this was actually separate from that.
Perfect. Good deal. Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it.
Yeah, but thanks for bringing that up.
You bet.
Okay. So.
So Eric, did you have a chance to read that Bill Connerly piece that he had published in Forbes on the future of Portland?
No, I wanted to. I went to the link, but it said I had to subscribe.
You should be able to get it if you.
You got to work around that a little bit.
It's out there. It's out there, but it's really. I think it's a very interesting perspectives on what's happening in Portland.
He sets it up with a good framework. It's about a city has to have a reason why it exists. We look historically, cities existed because of, trade or commerce, or there were certain geographical features. And what does that mean as time goes on? Does your city exist because it's a good place for intellectual workers, or does it exist for other reasons? And how you have to frame the viability of your city by tying it to a specific purpose, or why does this city exist? And it's kind of an existential question that a lot of localities are having to go through. So
yeah, I definitely want to read that, especially as a resident of Portland. So, but thank you, Bill, for passing that along.
We are slowly trickling back in. So Eric, are you going to, how do you want to do the focus areas? Are you going to step through kind of the areas we talked about in piece by piece? What's your?
So I have another PowerPoint that I can share that basically captures a draft I sent you earlier. It's the same concepts, just different format. And so I thought I'd walk through those focus areas and then get feedback from the group as whether or not they resonate, or whether or not we have to go back to the drawing board. Or something in between.
Yeah. For what it's worth, I thought you did actually a very good job capturing based on the data that we've received. So hopefully it's just minor tweaks, but
well, happy to do what the task force wants. So Danielle, while we're waiting, did you want to do any kind of acceptance of the minutes?
I thought about that, and I forgot to say that at the beginning. We're not required to formally, but the minutes will be distributed. If you see an error or something you would like clarified, let us know. You can send an email. You can bring it up at the beginning of the meeting. But I don't want to stand on ceremony too much. So I looked over them. That's how I remembered it happening. So I was happy.
You can thank Rachel, who put that together.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I just, this is Rachel Exton here. I just wanted to add that if you do have any changes, if you notice anything, even just grammatically, like spelled wrong or something, you can just email me directly. You don't have to go through Eric or Daniel or anybody. So.
Yeah, if it's spelling related, you don't want me in the loop. That'll make it worse. So.
Great.
All right, Eric, I think almost everybody's back. So why don't you go ahead and we'll get to the meat of the meeting. So because we're all very excited.
Excellent. All right, I'm going to switch to a share screen again, and you get yet another PowerPoint. And let me get to the beginning of this. There we go. And it should go up one. Okay. So for those of you who were at the last meeting, you may recall that we talked about the vision statement as being the first product that you're going to be working on. And the vision statement will be based on community input that we're going to gather and receive over the next 6 weeks, in addition to your own thoughts and perceptions. And the vision statement, as you may recall, and I'm going to go down to this chart that I showed you last time, it plays a key role in terms of how we move from that to an action plan. So the blue lines, just to refresh your memory, the blue lines are part of the vision statement, and you have an overarching core vision statement usually a paragraph or two, describing Medford in the year 2040. And then we break it down by focus area or topic area. And those are the areas that you're wanting to really focus your efforts on. And then from that, we're able to derive the action plan, which are the strategies and the actions to bring it to life. And some of you have already kind of jumped into the pool already down in the yellow lines, but that's fine because we take notes and we will bring all those ideas back to you. So, but what we're talking about today is that second line, and that is the vision focus areas. What are those vision statements that are going to be specific to a particular area? So I've, based on all the information that we've received so far, I categorize things into 5 different areas, and I'm going to go through those, and then at the end, let me know if you, other than clarification questions along the way, let me know whether or not they resonate or we need to do something slightly different. So these are the 5 areas that we defined, and these are the titles that we propose using, but everything is open to being changed. First is fostering economic growth and resiliency. The second is enhancing hometown. Third, connecting community. Fourth, fostering safety and wellness. And fifth, promoting recreation opportunity. So let's take a look at what each of these means. So within fostering economic growth and resiliency, the key concept here is to build on the existing economic strengths that you have in Medford to foster a more sustainable, robust, and diverse economy. And the topics that would typically be included under this umbrella, and these are not meant to be exclusive, these are only meant to be examples so that as we start getting ideas in, we're going to start putting them in these different buckets to be able to flesh them out. So family wage employment would be under this, business diversity, downtime revitalization, workforce training, strategic support for foundational and key industries. In other words, building on the strengths that you already have from an economic standpoint. Other economic development and resiliency concepts that might fall under this, and then airport as an economic resource. Those would be examples of the types of things that would fall into this category. The next category or focus area is enhancing hometown. And the idea behind this is that there was a lot of emphasis on making Medford a town that multi-generations want to live in and want to be in. And it's not a retirement community. It's not for any one particular group, but rather multi-generational and multi-income. So people in the lower income levels have the opportunity to live and have this as their hometown. So creating a community that supports and is attractive to multiple generations and income levels. Topics under this would include things like physical improvements that make your community attractive, landscape, signage, that kind of thing, family-oriented elements, things that would attract families to the community, a great K through 12 system, youth activity programs, and so forth. Affordable housing for multiple income levels, neighborhood livability measures, anything that kind of falls under the umbrella of livability. Arts and culture falls under this, as well as the city branding / image piece. And so you can start seeing the correlations of what we heard this earlier and putting them into these categories. The third one is connecting community. And this really has to do with the inclusivity concept and tying people together as a community. So enhancing the connections, both social and physical, to promote and achieve a more inclusive community environment. Things that would be included under this would be social connectivity programs and activities, things that bring people together. multicultural events, programs, engagement, and communications. Third places, which I mentioned earlier, that have broad community appeal, that are not third places that are that attract a variety of different communities within the Medford community. Physical connectivity. This gets at your transportation network. There was some discussion about how there are some road connections that really need to be made to physically bring the city together. That would fall under physical connectivity, or people being able to get from one place to another, public transit, that type of thing. Public engagement in local government decision-making, and that's being inclusive of the whole community and getting the community to participate more broadly, and engaging the greater Medford area. And that is that the concept of it doesn't stop at the borders of Medford. The community is broader than that. So that inclusivity is part of this. Fostering safety and wellness. This is the concept of creating a physical and social environment that promotes individual well-being and safety for all. Things that would fall under this category would be things like healthcare access, physical safety measures and projects, things like crosswalks, emergency preparedness, and that is everything from talking about fires, which is probably on most people's minds at the moment, but also talking about are you training the community to be able to handle emergencies when they come up. Sustainable and reliable resources, and what that means is that has to do with do you have the water supply you need? Do you have the energy supply you need? The infrastructure is what people talked about drinkable water and the quality of drinking water, water supply. Justice systems, that's facilities, it's resources, and it's programs. And it's also talking about social equity as part of that. And then social programs, when you talk about things like substance abuse and mental health care and so forth, that would fall under this. The next and the last focus area is promoting recreation opportunity. Recreation was a big part, as we mentioned before, of the interviews. So to build on the community's recreational and sports focus for residents, businesses, and visitors to enhance the local economy and livability. So these would include the sports programs and facilities that you folks have talked about, increasing and enhancing parks and other urban outdoor opportunities. Outdoor recreation that differentiates from the second bullet of what's going on around Medford from an outdoor activity standpoint. And recreational facilities that might include things like pools, gyms, indoor rock climbing, that sort of thing. That would be an example of something that would fall under it. Now, again, these things don't have to be part of the vision, but it's just to give you what I'm calling, instead of legislative intent, conceptual intent. So, so with that, I'm gonna go back and open it up, and just trying to find a way where I can see everybody's faces in this and have this up on the screen, but I don't think I can. So if you can raise your hand virtually, that probably would help. Oops. There we go. Let's see here. I'm not. Is anybody raising their hand? Because I'm not seeing it. Is this resonating with folks? Let's go ahead and chime in.
Here, if you've got that up, I can help call on people. So I saw Jerry raise his hand and then Christina.
Okay, Jerry. Jerry, is your mic off?
There we go.
Yeah, good. I was ready. I was letting you know it was up and I could say it.
Christina.
Same. I mean, is the question whether or not we want to kind of be a part of a group that's more focused on talking about these aspects? Am I on mute?
No. It's repeat that, please.
What is your question? I guess I need clarification.
Okay. The question is, overall, do these focus areas resonate with you as the focus areas that would be the extension of your vision statement and would be the basis for developing your action plan?
Okay. In my opinion, yes.
So
yeah,
Marta.
Mike, I see your hand.
Yeah, I would agree with Christina. I think that this really covers it nicely. There might be other things that come up in the future, but I think this is a good start.
Good, thanks. See, looking for other hands. I see Brett.
Yeah, Al's comment earlier in the day really stuck with me. This idea of folks who've been here and what they've seen and the amazing things that have been done here in the city and in the valley. And then I was thinking, and how do we continue to move that forward? And that your second thing around enhancing hometown captures that in a beautiful way. I think they're all right on, but that idea that this isn't a retirement community and it's not just this, it can be all of that. That to me is the potential of Medford. It's a bit of everything. And that's a hometown. And so that just, as I heard you go through these, that one particularly resonated.
Okay, good. And Denny, I think you have to unmute,
Yep,
unhide
sorry.
yourself. There you go.
I've got everything hidden. My question is, and maybe you've already said it and I just hadn't heard it. Is the resiliency in terms of economic resiliency, or in terms of the overall resiliency of the city in terms of all the changes and aspects that we've discussed?
The intent with that particular focus area is resilience of the economy.
Okay.
Yeah. That would be, that was the intent.
Yeah, I support the list.
All right. Anybody else?
This is Tom. I've got a question.
Yeah.
Number 5 seems like it's just a part of what 2, 3, and 4 are saying. And it seems like recreation is something that enhances a hometown, or it's a place that connects community, and the fostering safety and especially wellness. I don't know if I'm the only one who feels this way, but it feels like it's putting too much focus on recreation by giving it this number 5. It just seems like a function of those other larger encompassing topics of 2, 3, and 4.
Okay. How do others feel about that?
This is Chris. Yeah, I was actually thinking kind of the same thing. I think the word promoting might be, how it's, we're promoting recreation. I think there's several things here that we would be trying to promote, along all the different categories here. And I think this is just calling out one area of opportunity that exists specifically.
Okay, so you would be in agreement then that this might be a little bit of overkill, or maybe calling it out is not, it doesn't deserve calling out as much as it deserves to be included in the other focus areas.
No, this is Christina, can you open up that focus area again?
Of course. So the reason that I put this in here is because there was so much focus on recreation as part of the identity of Medford. And but this is up to you folks as to whether or not you think it deserves a separate call out or not.
And I'll speak to that, Eli here. I mean, my thought, of course, and I'm the Travel Medford promotion tourism guy. So, you know, when I saw this, I think a lot of it is definitely predicated on what we land on as it relates to the goals. And these are always difficult to work backwards. But for me, you know, the vision is more of, you know, what we want to become as well as aspirational, right? But I think when we're honest with ourselves, we've done a lot of this work at the Chamber and within Travel Medford. And one of our pillars for Medford is recreational sports, especially with USCCP and the asset that is. So I think a lot of it really is dependent on the goals and focuses that we land on. But it definitely is one of our absolute pillars.
So Eli, you think it deserves its own call out in the focus areas?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, and this is Christina. I tend to agree with Eli on this. And the reason being is we do have a strong identity around some recreation, which has been a draw for a significant population here, which is golf. And we're talking about inclusion, we're talking about school programs, we're talking about all these other facets that we're going to be supporting. So I think we need to be kind of a little bit more realistic about the value of kind of drawing this type of opportunity out for our community, but also communicating that it exists, because I think it supports and fosters, you know, over.
You just cut out there at the end, Christina.
At what point?
I think what you were saying is it deserves to be called out.
I think it does. I can see why we would try to maybe put it under another category. But frankly, I think it's significant enough, especially looking into the future on what's going to draw people to the area, what's going to, you know, give the impression of livability. You know, we take a look at other areas where we've got people working from home now, and how that dynamic is shifting. We want to make sure that we don't lose sight of something that's incredibly valuable for the region.
Mike?
Yeah, to go along with that, and what might not be readily apparent to all of us is that when we get down to the strategy portion of this, there are an array of opportunities on the transportation funding side, both at the state and federal level, that can be used to advocate for these things. So I think it deserves its own category simply because it'll call it out and keep our attention on making certain that we take advantage of those funding opportunities.
Okay, Bill?
Eric, I guess, you know, an area that I would title it as is a place of unique opportunities or partnerships. And, you know, a couple of examples. One, Montero's a great example of that. You know, what we did with the South Interchange by bringing together a unique group of partners allowed us to fix that interchange probably 15 years sooner than it would have been solved if we didn't actually go back and say, well, why don't we have intergovernmental agreements and stuff? So when I think of that, I think of the Higher Education Center in downtown Medford. Nowhere else has the community college and the university come together, and in this case, in partnership with the county in developing that property. So I think that one of our strengths as a community is that we are willing to partner. I look at Asante with Rogue Regional Medical Center, partnered with Ashland Community Hospital. partnered with Three Rivers Community Hospital. These are unique partnerships that I think we can be very proud of. And I'd love to see that built into our vision going forward, just as we were talking, just as Al Densmore was talking about. Remember, the Eagle Point Irrigation District basically owned that water up on Mount McLaughlin, but we partnered with the irrigation district. And as Al says, we have one of the best water systems in the state of Oregon because of that partnership. And I'd love to see that emphasized more in our vision, that this is a place that you can come with unique solutions and find a way to bridge across government, nonprofit, for-profit. So that's my spiel.
Bill, I just would like to get a little clarification here. Are you suggesting that that is another focus area?
I think to me, I think it's one of the things that really makes us different. And so I would like to consider that either as a replacement or an additional area in the overall strategy or the overall vision, excuse me. I'm not digging down, I'm looking up.
Okay, so with your permission, I'm going to put that into a parking lot for a moment until we get through the recreational piece, and then we can come back to that.
Okay.
All right, Carol?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I agree that it needs to be on there. It is the bottom of 5 topics. So if you're looking at the economic development, businesses coming in are going to want to know what their employees will have as available to do. You want a younger population that might come with that who consider Medford boring. And so I think it's an attractive asset to be able to say, we have developed these types of off-work activities and availability for them to come. It also, you think about Parks and Rec and other areas and things that bring diverse populations together as part of a community. So if you want diversity and things that can bring folks together, this is a huge part of that, as well as that economic piece, because businesses aren't just they are looking for housing for their employees, they're looking for the draw to bring employees in who are interested and dynamic.
Okay. Mike? Did you just have your hand up from before?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I should have taken it down.
Okay. All right. So I'm hearing a pretty strong case for keeping the recreation opportunity focus area. For those of you who thought that perhaps it didn't need to be there, would you like to make a case for taking it out still, or shall we leave it in?
I have one issue I want to bring up. I'm going to look out for the city manager here. He's going to get a question when he presents this to council. I can't believe you're talking about recreation when you don't have housing as a priority. How is this more important than housing? What do you think the right way to answer that is? Because
before I answer the right way, I'll answer, the Parks and Recreation way. Parks and Recreation should rule the city and everything that.
Clearly, long live the department, and may we all swear fealty to Capra. I agree.
I think it's a great question, because when we talk about providing housing in the community, we're talking about providing housing in like the urban growth boundary areas that are coming into the city. And as part of that, through the RPS process, there's a requirement for open space in all of these areas. So the debate that we're having right now with the developers is, well, if we're required to have this open space, then what's the mechanism to be able to build it? The city should pay for building it, and we provide the land. So there's a little mechanism with what we're working through about providing open space in these areas. But when we're talking about affordable housing, these are folks that are spending a majority of their income on housing costs. And so what they need is low cost recreation, and that is a park with trails and other things that are in it. And that we be able to link those neighborhoods with trails. So both go hand in hand. It's
spot on.
But I can see people's point of view about, man, there's just a lot about recreation in here. But let me just tell folks a little bit too, is the comments that we receive as a city when people travel here to play at US Cellular Community Park or travel through Medford about how they wish they had our facilities.
Yeah, and I'll speak to that too, because I think it's important for us all to think about, and something I've been thinking about in this process is that we need to remember that, you know, we're in competition with a lot of cities across the West Coast. And to answer Daniel's question, I think one of my arguments would be is that, you know, yes, there's a great deal of problems and issues that face our community. And one of the greatest ways to face off some of that is to help bring and attract visitation and external dollars to be spent and used in our community. And USCCP is a shining example of that. Over $114 million in economic activity the last 10 years of people coming from all across America, spending money in our community, staying in our hotels, eating at our restaurants, that bring that vitality that in essence helps pay for housing and rent costs. So I think we also need to think about ways to continue to attract people, not just to benefit our own citizens, but really attract the visitation.
Okay. I see a number of hands going up, but Daniel, did you have anything else on that you wanted to add?
No, I just wanted to make sure Brian was ready to answer the question. I think it should be in there. It's a big part of what we do, but I know that that's going to be a perceived weakness by some constituencies, and I think we've got a good way to articulate why this group feels it should be important.
Tom?
I threw this out there because I didn't want to diminish recreation, but rather I felt like it's part of a multiple of the upper items. But I heard Mike say, by having it in this position in our vision, it may give us added clout when going after some governmental funding or grants or something. At least that's the way I'd interpreted what Mike was saying. So if that is just the way things work, then I'll say leave that in there.
Okay. Al?
Thank you. I just wanted to pick up a little bit on what Bill was talking about. I don't know if it's a different focus area so much as opening ourselves up for opportunities, both internal and external in terms of possible relationships and partnerships that go beyond the city, inviting the world, if you will, to become partners with us. Whether you're a business person or anyone else. Let me use an example. I think if I read correctly in the Mail Tribune, there was a developer out of Portland who saw an opportunity with the sale at the Inn at the Commons to look at repurposing the Inn at the Commons for housing in the core area of Medford. It seems to me that if somebody from Portland saw that as an opportunity, we need to maybe find ourselves a way of talking or opening ourselves up for potential opportunities and partnerships. In ancient history, sometime when the dinosaurs walked the earth, I broke a tie that sited the Rogue Valley Mall, where it sits right on the Greenway in a very convenient spot where if you started to look at the potential of, well, where would be a good place to have housing? How would it connect to a transportation system that didn't involve cars? How could we create a place where we could have a multi-purpose housing development, grocery stores, people who didn't have to use automobiles? Do we want to rethink, okay, how can we take strategic opportunities in our community and then create them and place them in our vision for the future. Because I can tell you right now, though I broke the tie for the mall back in the 80s, I don't think it's going to stay as a shopping center. And I think it's got a higher and better purpose than what I broke the tie for.
Okay, thanks. Mike, or Daniel, did you have something you were about to say? Mike?
Yeah, just to go back to Daniel's comment, really this is just part of the element that goes back to item number 1. Because at the end of the day, if you looked at the graphic that was put up earlier about the differentiation between household income and housing costs, that's a real barrier to economic development. So by fostering a strategy that partners with our major employers, with our educational institutions, then we raise that bottom number to where the household income is higher, and that provides the mechanism for dealing with one element of our housing crisis.
Okay, so thank you, Mike. I'm going to make a note of that, and I'd like to kind of close out the discussion on recreation focus group or focus area. And I think it seems pretty apparent everybody's okay with that moving forward. Any objections? No? Okay. So I want to circle back. I promised to circle back to Bill's point. And I'm watching the time here. I know we're running a little bit over, but Bill, you brought up the idea of having a separate focus area related to partnerships. And I'd like to just hear from some other folks if they see any traction for that. Or is it just a tool, a thread of a tool that we put through all of the different focus areas? Everybody's chomping at the bit here.
I think it's a strategy. I think it's really important. I think because we are a regional center, there are certain problems that we have to partner with others to solve. There's just no other way to do it. I'm trying to think what types of projects would fall under that though, Eric. I mean, I can think of ways to apply partnering as a tool to all 5 of the ones you identified. I don't know, I can't think of one that would fall under partnership on its own that wouldn't fit into one of the first 5 and uses partnership as a solution. I do think it's worth calling out because I think we need more of it. There, you know, sometimes we're good at it. Sometimes we're not. Sometimes we get a little tribal, especially when we talk about our interactions with other cities. So I think it is something that's important that we look at for the next 20 years. But I'm struggling a bit with it being its own focus area, but I'm curious what others have to say.
Yeah, Denny, you had your hand up. Your mic? Yeah.
Yep. I agree with Daniel. I think it's a tool, it's a tactic, it's a way to get some of these other things done. And I also agree, sometimes we're good at it and sometimes we're not. I wouldn't say it was an absolute strength of the area, but it's a tool that could go into several of these areas. I wouldn't call it out as a separate topic.
Okay, Brian?
Yeah, my question would be to you, Eric. Have you ever seen a partnerships part of the vision statement?
No.
Okay.
Not as a standalone topic. It's been threaded into the statements before, but not as a standalone topic.
But that's what I was asking, is it part, as you've seen it as part of the overall vision statement?
Yes, and I've seen it in the narratives of vision statements, yes.
So there's still an opportunity, because I think it reflects in all of the categories, and this is the task force to decide that. It's something that the council is talking about now, about how do we create more partnerships to get things done regionally, more than just in Medford, and maybe it's also part of our overall vision statement.
Actually, I think, Brian, you've hit the nail on the head. I think the vision statement's where it goes, because a lot of the subunits of the city like the Water Commission, we struggle with that mightily. Are we responsible to the citizens of Medford who are, electors of the city? Are we responsible to the whole community? Are we responsible to the valley? What does Medford want to be? Do we just want to be within our walled city, or do we want to treat the area as a region? And there's some disagreement on that point. And I think having the city or having this group come to a consensus on that would be helpful.
Okay. All right. Well, we will make a note for the discussion when we get to starting to talk about the vision statement, that concept is one that we've got on the table. So, okay. Unless anybody else has any other thoughts about that, I would suggest moving on, if that's all right.
I have a question, and it's bugging me, and I don't know exactly where will it fall, honestly, in all of this that we're doing, but I like the idea of partnership and collaboration, because that's how we can work with others. But the thing that I see a lot in the community, especially the low-income community, minority community, is the affordable broadband, for everyone. Where can they follow that? Not everybody can afford to pay 40, 60, 80 bucks a month for broadband. And I was wondering, how can the city make that not a priority, but be part of keeping the equity lens, give the opportunity. The more we live in technology, as you can see it, to me, broadband, access to internet is not a luxury anymore, it's a necessity. Like electricity, like water, like sewer, like those things. So I'm just, the more I think about it, there are families who, especially now with distance learning, that they have to have affordable internet service, affordable broadband. So is my question to the city manager, to everybody in this group. I don't know where will it fall, keeping the equity lens in mind for that service.
Lilia, if I can jump in here, what I would suggest is that's something that would typically fall in either the context of the focus area vision statement, the narrative, when we get to that, or down into the strategies. And my recommendation would be that we mark that down, put it as a placeholder, and come back to that.
Thank you. I just didn't want it to go by and not say anything about it. We just have to consider it. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I want to make mention of, I mentioned last week, is that we're going to get ideas like this that kind of fall in the lower levels of the action, not lower level as in priority, but lower level in the process, that we don't want to lose sight of. And so we are keeping a bank of ideas for actions. We're keeping a bank of ideas for strategies as they come up, and ideas that may need to be incorporated into the narrative of the focus areas. So good to bring that up, and we'll make sure that gets noted. All right. Anything else? Or I would suggest we move on. Mr. Chair?
I agree. Let's roll on. Are we not logo? I lost my mitt. I lost my agenda.
Yeah, the next
public engagement with Seth. Sorry about that. And Seth, I know we squinched you a little bit, but go ahead and take your time. We'll make it up somewhere else. This is important, so we want to make sure we spend time on it.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think the first couple sections will take very long. So the first couple of items, if everybody can see it, is just some follow-up on things we talked about in the last meeting. And the first one was our community engagement plan. So last time you gave us some feedback to add some audiences to our list. So we added the LGBTQ community members. We added people who work remotely from home. And people on the call noted that I didn't have on my slide small businesses, but it wasn't the plan. I apologize, I just didn't get it on my slide. So we do have small businesses in the plan. We also got a question asking why we don't have middle and higher income folks on our audiences if they are such a large group in Medford. And we clarified that we welcome and want engagement from everyone in Medford, including those folks. We know that we do hear from those folks without trying very hard by using the city's default tools, which we're planning to use anyway. And we can see from the survey that we got that input. So we're absolutely not excluding folks who are higher and middle income from this process. We just know that we need to put more intention and priority on reaching the folks we don't typically hear from if we're going to be inclusive in it. So I hope that's clear to folks the way I explain it. And as I said earlier, the community engagement plan is going to be an evolving document over time as we learn. So I will distribute the current version of the plan and we'll have it posted on our website. And as we make updates, we'll just continue to update the document. I did want to ask again, especially for the folks who weren't at the last meeting, if you have any additional comments that you've been mulling over about community engagement. We did have a couple of comments earlier today about tools we could be using, and I just wanted to take a minute to ask if there's anything else you'd like to add to the plan. And Daniel, I need your help to see people.
I'm looking, I don't see anybody waving at the camera.
Okay.
All right, so I'm gonna say you captured it, but it is a living document. If we go through this and we find out we have a deficiency or we discover an area where we can do a little bit better outreach, I know you're open to that. And we'll be sure and let you know.
Absolutely, and my email should be available, or you can work through one of the city staff to get a hold of me if we need to make an update. So the next topic is the project logo. So just to rehash the goals of the logo and developing this for the project, it's to help community members easily identify the vision process and to create an identity that is separate from but related to the city of Medford, and using that Medford M that we're all aware about. These were the options we looked at together last time. And you all gave really great detailed feedback. My designer was very appreciative. It made his job easy to get the next iteration. But I just wanted to reflect back some of the things that we heard from you. A lot of folks really liked the lettering of option 1, but there are a lot of positive comments about the colors and inclusiveness that was associated with the second option. And so we found a way to combine those. We wanted to make the second option less distracting, that there's too much going on. So we like the concept, we wanted to focus it a little bit more. Let's see, we liked that it evoked motion and progress in this wheel and this gear sort of format. And we, let's see, we wanted to add some more colors to the palette. We asked for a brown. And without further ado, I'll go ahead and show you what that looked like. So we worked with your chairs and our core team to include all your feedback in this logo, and we feel real good about it. So you see it's kind of got that cleaner typeface and more streamlined color that option 1 had, but still using that wheel and this multicolored celebration of diversity in the wheel. And we also did hear that lots of people liked the badge format from option 1. So my designer went ahead and made a badge version of the logo. That'll be really versatile in the way we use this on materials. So we've gone ahead and adopted this as the core team using your feedback. And we've started using this on the project website, which I will show you in just a moment. So thanks again for making this a collaborative process and helping us make a logo that's going to be really good for the Medford community.
Everybody's smiling and nodding their heads up and down if you're not watching. So
Thank you.
Well done.
Yeah, good job.
Thanks a lot. Okay. So I think our next topic, unless I don't think I'm steamrolling it yet.
Just keep going.
Great. So this is our first big public input stage for the vision. So it's really exciting. Moving on from our little pre-survey we did with the community satisfaction survey, this is the first time we're really going to ask people about what they think about the vision process and what their vision is for Medford in the future. And so some of the things I'm going to talk about, some new tools we're developing, is the new Medford website, which is medford2040.org. The questions we're going to ask people on the next survey, and we're going to do a little training after a break for how you are all going to help us do outreach in what Eric calls the Speakers Bureau. So here's a little preview of the website. It is medford2040.org. It should be easy to remember and help everyone focus on the year that we're all oriented towards in this vision process. The use of this website is really to share information about the process and to help people know what the opportunities are for them to get involved. It also documents this task force's efforts. So we'll be posting meeting materials to the website, and we can post the meeting links to make it easy for people to find the links for your meetings and see your schedule. It will help us collect comments at key periods, so we can link to the survey and call out opportunities to collect comments. And we can also use it to collect emails from folks so that if they go to the website when we're not asking for input, they know how to sign up and stay involved. And also just get in touch with the project team if they've got a question between those key milestone periods. So I can give you a little tour just briefly. So here's the website. It is mobile friendly because we know that not everybody has access to a desktop computer at home, and some folks, their only internet access is on their phone. So we want to make sure it works well on mobile. So it's all one single page with navigation up here that helps you jump around to different pieces of the website. We are, with Lilia's help, we're translating into Spanish to make sure we're using a Spanish dialect that is local to Medford and makes sense to folks there. But we can also include a translation widget that'll use just the Google Translate to provide information in other languages. It is not as high a quality translation as a professional translation, but I think given our priorities with language, it's efficient to have Lilia's help with Spanish and then use an app for the rest of the languages. We can have this latest news section for things that we want to call people's attention to, and we can announce the next task force meetings and surveys in this section, give an overview of the process and the documents that this process will produce, the vision statement and the action plan, talking about the goals and process for the vision, explain the roles and responsibilities of the different stakeholders in this process, show the schedule and where people can get involved, and then post links to surveys and have this comment form that'll help people sign up for emails too. And at the bottom we have the task force's information about the task force, and then places to document your agendas and meeting notes and other items that we want to make sure we include, including your meeting schedule. So this is a draft. We're still fine tuning it, and my designer is still making it more beautiful. And we're getting the links put up, and we still have the Spanish translation to put up. But overall, I hope it's given a good impression so far.
Seth, when you push out social media stuff, does the vision have its own like Facebook page that you post as when you're pushing that stuff out, or are you posting those things as the city?
We've been posting things as the city. We've not talked about making a dedicated page. Is that something that?
No, I was just curious because you'd have to rebuild the reach, but where you're having separate identities. So I was just curious how you.
I was going to bring up that point, so thank you for making it for me.
I don't have a strong opinion on that one way or another. Just
right. No, I think just having the website as the base for information, and then using others following to use their numbers towards this process, which will only last a year. I think that's the most effective way to do this. Okay. When we do share this with you, I would welcome your feedback. If there's a way that could make the website more useful, please do let me know. And we expect that to be later this week probably, but I need to check in with KJ and Lilian on the translation. Let's see. Back to my presentation. Okay, so the next questions we're going to be having on the survey, and Eric, please feel free to chime in if we need to frame these better, or at least provide framing that I'm not adding right now. But the key questions we want to be asking folks about Medford is, what do you value most about Medford? To help us know what 2040 should look like. What current aspects of Medford do you want to carry into the future? Describe your preferred vision for Medford's future. And then also, is there anything missing from Medford that you and or your community need? And that kind of stemmed from some conversation about the last survey, when folks were saying that there's not really a place for me here, or a space for me the way I want there to be. And also thinking about those communities of color who had those kinds of comments.
Hey, Seth, just to clarify, this is input for a survey you're going to put in the field and have the results back to assist the committee in shaping the vision statement, correct?
Thank you, Daniel.
Yes. Okay.
That's right. Yeah, so these are questions we want to ask the committee, ask the community to help you all here at the task force shape the vision statement. Eric, is there anything else you would like to add about these questions?
No, I was about to chime in what Daniel just said, but as we said, we're going to be getting you the information from the community to use as fodder for developing that vision statement. And so these questions are supposed to be designed to get you the type of information you need to draft a vision statement. So hopefully these questions are doing that. If they're not, or they're not as clear to you, let us know, and we'll look at what we can do.
And also, if there's information I think we have a little bit of time right now. Tell me if I'm wrong, but if you all have ideas for questions or ways you want to.
Yeah,
we
do have a little bit of time, and I think this is important and merits some discussion. We're asking, does this solicit the type of feedback that we're going to find helpful? We can add another question. I mean, we got a very good response rate in the first survey, so we don't have survey fatigue yet. People are willing to give us their feedback. Is this soliciting the type of information that we need to get a good cross section of opinions out of the committee, or out of the community? Sorry.
This is Denny. Just a quick question. When you ask people what they think and they tell you, and then you don't do something with it or you ignore it, you run a risk of kind of the integrity of the process is kind of questioned. And the reason I ask that is, what if the bolus of folks in the community say, you know, I like Medford the way it is, and I don't think it ought to change all that much. There's an awful lot of folks that feel that way. We're looking for change. We're looking for a more dynamic, fluid kind of look at what Medford could be. What are we going to do when or if folks say, I kind of like it the way it is? How are we going to reconcile that with our idea of a vision being something different than what we are today? Or is it that?
I think we have to ask them, what is it they like? And that's a very general statement. If there's specific things they like, I think we can incorporate it. But the fact of the matter is, the town is changing. Saying I like it the way it is doesn't mean do nothing. Because if we just sit on our hands, the town's going to change and not be the way it always has been. So I think you take it as an opportunity to identify the things that are good about the community, but that might require some maintenance and some cultivation and some stewardship, because this is a good place to live. There's lots I like about this community, but I think that we still have to incorporate it into the vision. I don't know, I'll let other people speak, but that's my take.
Well, my worry is that we've got to be careful not to alienate the big part of Medford that likes things the way they are, so to speak. I know we have to keep moving forward, but if it's the periphery that is driving that discussion and not the whole of the community, we have to be really, really careful. Because there are a lot of folks that are really excited about the vision of moving forward, keeping things more dynamic and fluid and progressive. And then there's a lot of the hometown folks that don't want to go there necessarily. So I'm just suggesting we have to be careful of what we ask folks, and them knowing that their answers may be in a contrast to where we actually think things ought to go.
If I
Maybe
can,
I'm overthinking it.
yeah, if I can just chime in here a little bit, just on my experience in working in other visioning processes and other public involvement engagement processes. First of all, there's no way you're going to be able to do everything that everybody wants. The key in my experience is managing expectations. Managing expectations about what you're going to do with the information that's coming in, and managing expectations in terms of what they have the ability to help influence. And so we're trying very hard, and Seth and his team has been trying very hard to make sure that as we're soliciting information, that we're also putting the correct expectation out there. And the transparency of this process will also help to vet that out as well, as people see, yeah, there was a strong movement for this and maybe not so much for that. The other last point I'd just like to make is with regard to changing Medford from what it is. One of the questions we ask about is what current aspects do you want to carry into the future? And the reason is because there are good things. It doesn't mean Medford has to change in total. You carry the good things forward, and the things that you need to tweak, you tweak.
I was going to point that out too, Eric, is that we did gear those first two questions towards the things that people really do like about Medford, because we don't want to lose those. But I agree that part of the strategy for comforting folks is to use that transparency, make sure we reflect back what we heard and how we're using, which input we're using, and our justification for using it that way, so that they know that we heard that they like this and that thing isn't changing. Or this thing is changing because there's this great challenge that we really, really do need to overcome.
So back to the initial question before I derail this. Do these questions, do you think they'll solicit the feedback that will be helpful for us?
I say it does. Even the ones who are not, this is Milo, of course. Even describe your preferred vision for Medford's futures, it includes the ones who may don't want to see it change. But I think we can alternate and use the word improvement instead of change when it comes up.
This is Bill. One of the things, Seth, and it actually kind of is circular, so it probably goes back into some of our earlier conversations, is when I think of some important communities or elements of our community, one that really stands out is the Rogue Valley Manor. Now, I know we list Pacific Retirement Services as a community partner, but I also know that there's the right way and the wrong way to connect with the Rogue Valley Manor. And I'm sure maybe Al can comment on this, but I think maybe a little more research on whether or not in our senior living facilities, do they have resident councils, and how do we connect with them rather than just trying to go through the manager or the operator and assuming that we're getting the right input. So when I think they're critical, and even under Pacific Retirement Services, they have the low income senior housing as a separate division. And so again, I think they're really important elements of our community, and I'd really like to get their input. And when I think about the economic impact that the Rogue Valley Manor has, not only in property taxes, but in purchases and everything else, it's huge. So I think we should maybe spend a little more time digging in, particularly to our senior housing facilities, rather than just assuming, well, we put them on the list with the management companies, they'll take care of that.
Great. So you're talking about when we share the survey, making sure we get a hold of residents and not just managers of senior living facilities.
Well, yeah, and Al can talk to this. I mean, I spent 21 years on the Pacific Retirement Services Board, and the reality is they act as a guard against things like this, unless it's something that again, you at the manor, the key is to have people in the manor that say, yeah, I'd like to have this brought up, or can we send this out to our residents based on the input from a fellow resident. So I don't know, Al, do you want to comment on that, or have you been there long enough to learn the ins and outs?
My key still works, Bill, but after almost 2 years. Actually, KJ and I offline had a conversation since our last meeting about the manor and how to approach the community. And I guess writ large, there are a lot of other facilities in the community that I'm sure have the same kinds of issues. They're very protective of their resident populations. But if it's something for the betterment of the community, certainly the 800 residents up here and the 500 staff are a pretty important part of the economic future. The one thing I would say after having lived here for almost 2 years is that having a very social wife who I think already knows everybody here at the manor already, what we're finding is that whether you've lived here a relatively short period of time, a month or 6 months or a year or whatever, or whether you've lived here for 15 or 20 years, there's an incredible lack of connection with the residents of the manor and the larger community, and a hunger for them to connect in some way and talk about their future. When I look at the question that you have, key questions for community members, is there anything missing from Medford that you and your community need? Once people heard that I was once the mayor here, they seek me out and say anything they don't have or don't want. It seems like, can you go get this for us? But it does point to the fact that there is a big potential, like Bill says, of a major positive connection. I never knew that so many smart people per square inch could live anywhere in the country. But there's an incredible number of people with great talent and even wealth up here who would like to be helpful in the future.
So Al, am I hearing that you're already talking to KJ about ways to reach residents in the manor?
Yes, I gave her a contact person.
Okay, great, thank you.
Other feedback on Seth's questions for the next round of surveying? All right.
Okay, well, if anything comes up in the next...
Christina is waving.
Yeah, so I'm using the hand raise function. I don't know if you guys can see it.
Keep covering it up with my agenda and other stuff.
So just something to note. So I think to answer your question, I think that this set of questions is absolutely reasonable. My only concern is that in a way they kind of feel a little bit too broad, and I think we might have a lot of outliers. So my question to the group is, would we consider having this set of questions fall under the various focus areas? So that, you know, for example, people are asked, well, relative to recreation in the area, what do you value most about Medford, and so on and so forth. Maybe kind of help to provide a little bit of support to people that are being asked these questions by giving them some.
Seth and Eric, how many more surveys do you do as we go throughout this process?
So I think I do think Eric should address Christina's question about the organization and maybe focusing it. But to answer your question, Daniel, this is the first input. So this is the one that you're going to use when you're trying to draft the vision statement. And then there'll be a second one that actually has your draft, and we ask community, did we get it right? And so by then you should have a draft already, and they'll tell you if anything's missing, but this is your opportunity to get what you need to actually create the draft.
Okay. Eric, do you want to respond to Christina's question?
Yeah. So, you know, it's always kind of a balancing act in doing these surveys because you don't want to make it so onerous that people don't fill it out. And so we kept this broad on purpose because we wanted people to not feel like we were going to give them 10 questions and they'd have to go through 10 different answers. And we did think briefly about using the focus areas, but even that took a little bit more explanation that we weren't sure the community would absorb. I mean, in the survey, we actually took out references to vision statement because we want to talk about the vision with the community. We don't need them to worry about whether it's a vision statement or an action plan. We'll sort that out.
That makes sense.
But that was our rationale in coming up with a short list.
Christina, is that satisfactory?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Anybody else raising their hand virtually or in real life? Seth, are you happy with the feedback you've received?
Yes,
All right.
this is great. Thank you.
Then I think let's take a break. We'll come back at 4:10 p.m. Give us a little over 10 minutes. Talk about the Speakers Bureau. Then we'll have some open time to discuss. And if we're all good, we may get out just a little bit ahead of schedule, which is always nice. So see you back in a few minutes. Need some sort of electronic gavel, Eric. This is the point. If we were all in a room, I'd start banging the gavel and people would quit talking and stuff. They'd come back. Maybe something like they need a plug-in for Zoom with like sounds that we could make.
Just take your iPad and bang it on the screen.
Hey, there are days I feel like that, you know.
I have a quick question, if we can.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I really liked the idea that Christina had, and I understand it would be cumbersome for every category to have all 5 questions, but could you preface the survey with regards to economics, resiliency, housing, et cetera, and then would you respond to these 5 questions, and then they get to pick which, it kind of prompts topics for them. Does that make sense? Would that be an option?
That would be an option. I'll let Seth chime in on this as well. But my initial thought is that's an easy thing to do. The only downside that I could see to that, if you could call it that, is that people might have their own definition of what those terms mean and limit themselves where they might put something else down. But Seth, what do you think?
Yeah, it would definitely be some education up front, like information to provide at the beginning. So I think we just need to think about how essential that is, and is that what you need to get the input you need to form the vision statement? Because there's just another barrier to participation, the more information we require people to read through. Because I do think Eric's right that we would need to explain which focus areas, because they're not just like, or we would have to reframe it like economics, transportation, recreation. We have to put it in different terms to make it easier to digest, which is totally doable. But I do want to pose that if we think it's real important to structure it this way, otherwise, another asset to not doing that is we get people's unbridled ideas, and we can decide how they fit in the buckets that we're kind of not arbitrarily making, but using for our organizational purposes. And so it's organized in the way that they can organize it the way they want, which is some work, instead of us putting that on top of them. Are there any thoughts about the value of trying to use the topic area structure?
You could just use it real high level. It's like one sentence up top. You basically take each of the 5 areas, reduce it to a word, which I know is grossly oversimplifying it. Saying, for the following questions, do you have any thoughts on these areas or other areas? So it's not limiting, just it gives something to key off of. Sometimes when I take surveys, I look at the question, I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. But so I think using it more
value there too,
as a prompt than a constraint might be helpful.
Yeah, I think you're right. And like Eric said, it's always a balancing act. So I'll take a stab at doing that, and I'll see what the chairs and Eric think about the way I framed it. Good. Thank you.
Muted myself again. We're officially back in session. We're talking about the Speakers Bureau. Then we'll have a little time to circle back on anything else you guys want to discuss, and then we'll adjourn. So, Seth again. So, take it away.
Yeah, it's the Seth show again at the second half. Okay, let's see. Arranging my screens again. So again, I think Eric has already introduced this idea of a speakers bureau to you all, but this is that part of your responsibilities as a task force is to help us go out and do community outreach, as this is a community-driven process. And you are all selected for this task force because you're really involved in the community, and that's a valuable asset to this process. So the goal of this idea of a speakers bureau is to make engagement easy for audiences by going out to them instead of asking us to them to come to us. So we are going to be scheduling opportunities for you to go out and speak with various groups that you probably are already a part of and maybe participating as a member already, or others that we think you might be the right person to try to extend a hand to and get people involved in. And let's see. Part of that will be reaching trusted messengers. So getting at that barrier we talked about, where there are people in our community who don't have a great relationship with government right now. Who are those liaisons we can reach to try to get their communities more involved, and who can you stand alongside instead of in front of to be able to get our messages and this involvement opportunity to those people. This is also opportunity to build relationship with community groups and hopefully have a positive experience and help them want to be involved in these discussions in the future. And also, of course, encourage participation in the community survey. So we will have the survey, and we will want to drive people to that as much as possible, but I'll also say that anything you hear in these conversations is going to be valuable to us. So even if it doesn't isn't addressed specifically in those 5 questions we just talked about, if you hear things that are valuable to this process, we really hope you take notes and report back to the rest of us at our next meeting. So some resources that we're preparing for you to help you do this is we have some talking points just to help us all be consistent and on message about the way we're talking about the vision so that people don't get confused if they hear from one person or another what the vision is. And just kind of give us all some basic terminology about what this process is about. So I'll share those with you a little more in a minute. I'm offering to give you a presentation template so that follow these talking points that we have. And again, all of these can be made yours, so you don't need to stick to the talking points or this presentation template verbatim. You can make it fit your own style as long as we're all using the same terms and language for this, but part of this will be being yourself, which is the asset for this bureau. You'll have the project website, which you can refer to and try to get people familiar with for more resources. There'll be the link to the actual survey directly so that people can get direct access to that. And the city, I think namely Rachel and KJ, are offering to help coordinate which who is doing what, who's going to which group, so that we can try to make sure we're hitting all of the audiences that we know we really want to hit. So just a few tips that I have to offer for you. I'm sure you're all talented speakers in your own way, but I just want to encourage you to be yourself for this. You don't need to be somebody else when you're representing this process. We want you for your connection to community, and we think you should just lean into that. The talking point should help you do this, but help the people you're talking to understand the who, what, when, where, and why for this process, who's doing it, what it is, when is it happening, where is it happening, which is virtual now, and why we're doing this now. The talking point should help you do this. I'd encourage you to think about the interests of the specific groups you're talking about. So if you're going to like a transportation seminar, it's totally appropriate for you to focus the vision ideas on transportation. If you're going to a big medical provider, it's totally appropriate to talk about jobs and about the medical field in Medford. So make it really relevant to the people who you're talking to. Be aware of your position. So we want you to be who you are, but also understand what is the relationship with community. If you are in a space where you are a guest, we just want you to be respectful. And if there's, and I think particularly if you are a white person entering a space for people of color, just be aware of how you can be respectful in that space. And like I said, collect informal feedback as you can, note comments, and then also take the opportunity to ask people how they want to be engaged in this process. If we're presenting a tool that is not useful to the people you're talking to, we're totally willing to try to use different tools that'll serve them better. So these are some of the talking points that I'm going to run through. And again, I'll have a slide deck that is more streamlined. It doesn't have verbatim what all these talking points are, but just to help orient you to what's in the talking points. Of course, you want to introduce yourself and explain that you're a member of the Medford 2040 Community Vision Task Force. And this is a group of volunteers who are appointed by the Medford City Council to conduct this vision process. But it's on behalf of the people who live, work, and recreate in Medford. And what the community vision process is we want to develop a clear understanding of how community members want the city to look and feel in the next 20 years. And it's also going to include a detailed plan for how to achieve it. So I'm sure we've all heard that cynicism that like, sure, we're going to make this plan, but what's going to happen with it? We want to make sure they know that part of this process is creating that plan for how to implement it. And we want to emphasize that the task force's charge is to recommend a vision for Medford 2040 based on community input. To talk about the roles, I'm sure a lot of people will be thinking like, well, is the city doing this? If the city council appoints you to do this, but we want to emphasize that we intend this to be a community-driven process that's facilitated by the city of Medford. So of course, the Medford is helping sponsor and convene this process, but it's so that community can have a place to do this. The recommended vision will be based on community inputs, and it will be implemented by a wide partnership of stakeholders. So it won't just be the city's responsibility to implement the plan, but the partners that we identify in the action plan. It will involve ongoing discussions with people who live, work, and recreate in Medford, and around the things that we love about this place and the challenges we need to overcome. So again, I think we also want people to understand that this is not limited to people who live in Medford, that anyone who is a part of this place is welcome to help us shape the vision. Oops. I do think it'll be helpful to explain the documents that'll be produced by this process. And that right now we're talking about the vision statement, which is a broad description of what we want Medford to look and feel like by the year 2040. So this is this narrative piece that we're all getting towards. So we all kind of come to some understanding of what we see when we look in the future. And then the second part of that will be the action plan, which will be those detailed lists of strategies and actions that'll help us achieve the vision statement once we agree on that. And then both documents will be considered for adoption by Medford City Council, and that'll be the end of the process. As far as community engagement, we want the community engagement and process to be equitable and to try to represent the diverse populations in and around Medford. And we want to measure our success for community engagement by our ability to include all ages, genders, races, ethnicities, income levels, and just want to really make sure that everyone knows that we want to hear from everybody and we're taking steps to do that. This, I don't think you need to go through in detail with folks, but this would be versatile depending on where we are in the process, just to help people understand that we're early in the process right now. And this is our first time going out to the community to ask people about the vision statement, but also to reiterate that there are multiple opportunities to get involved. So we're early right now, just getting your input to help us draft the vision statement. And later on, we'll be asking for people to review and comment on that draft vision statement once we create it. And later on, we'll be doing the same thing by creating an action plan based on the vision statement and asking people to review it and make sure that we got it right. And also just gives them a timeline to know that this is a year-long process and to know that by the end of 2021, we expect to ask the City Council to consider and adopt the vision statement. And the last thing is we want to see how they can help us. And outline the resources that they have to do that. And so you can encourage them to try to share the website, which is medford2040.org, share the survey link and even take it immediately after you leave them. Sign up for the city's email updates and to forward emails to any distribution lists that they may have. Same goes for social media. If they have a social media presence, you can ask for their help sharing through their channels. Encourage them to follow the process and provide input at milestones as they occur. And just make sure they know that if for some reason internet is a barrier for their community members, that we can make printed and translated copies of materials available to them. So we don't want that to be a barrier. The talking points will have some additional details. So if you get extra questions, you can have that in your back pocket. And it's things we all know, but are hard to rattle off from the top of your head. Like, what are the roles and responsibilities of these 4 areas that we've talked about: community members, task force members, project team, city council. And then I've got a list of all who's on the task force and all the interests that you represent. So if people say like, well, how diverse is the task force? We can say we've got this person and let them know. Okay. Any questions about the talking points or the resources you need to be able to talk to people? I see Denny's hand.
Of course, I've got a question. I can't help myself. So when you go out and talk to folks and you gather their input, that's easy. The difficult part is synthesizing the information you got to make a coherent vision statement that says this is where, not in aggregate, but as a whole, we see this going. And maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but maybe this is for Seth, Eric, I don't know who. How are we going to synthesize the information and make it kind of a cogent thought and vision statement rather than an aggregate of who votes for what?
So that'll be mostly my scope as far as understanding and synthesizing what the community's comments were. So I'll produce a comment summary that says like, okay, so in this 6-week time frame, we went out to the community and asked for their thoughts, and we'll sift through all the comments and produce a summary for all of you to consider. And then Eric will guide you through using that summary to shape the vision statement.
Just to add on to that, not only will you get that summary and analysis from Seth, one of the things that I'll be doing is working to draft some text for you to shoot at. So by the time we get back to a meeting, we'll have some narrative that we can say, does this work? What would you change? So hopefully it won't be too onerous for you.
So my second kind of follow-up question is, as we think about our audiences that we are going to be asking these questions of, how do we make sure that it's apolitical? Because if you go to a large employer, or if you go to the chamber, a big chamber meeting on a monthly or bi-monthly basis, we've got to figure out a way to make sure this is apolitical. It's not a series of questions that are trying to drive a political agenda. Rather, it's a apolitical process that is trying to lead us to a better place. How do you recommend that if we get stuck and someone says, well, you're just trying to push Brian's agenda because Brian wants to do X, Y, and Z, and it's not where we want to go, but how have you experienced that in the past, and how have you navigated through it?
Go ahead, Seth.
I was just going to say, now that you mentioned it, I am surprised that politics, the topic of politics don't come up directly usually in these types of questions that I ask. So it's not something that usually occurs to me. Often you see people's values emerge in their comments, but they're not usually, don't have so much of an agenda as that, at least with people who aren't in positions of power. So I guess that might be where we need to work with Brian and KJ on some of the personalities we know that we're going to work with, and if they are a person in power, and if we expect the conversation to turn that way.
I have a question. This is for probably KJ, Christina. For the Latino Interagency meeting, if we present this, I would like for them to participate and do the like a survey right there at the meeting and get the results at the meeting. Is that possible electronically? You know, like have
absolutely.
Oh, really? Oh, good. Because we have 30, 35 people at every meeting, and have that. We always have a presenter. So have these be the topic and have them do the survey right there and now.
Lilia, can I talk to you about that later? And I think this is a logistic question on how to do it.
Sure.
So yeah.
But I just had the idea. We can do it there, Milo. Just once, because Milo attends this meeting too. Once we're there, have him do the meeting. So I just thought it's just a crazy idea, but.
No, I love that idea. And I would say, like, if you can get people to take the survey in front of you, then you know it's going to get done. So I would encourage that.
They listen to me really well.
Awesome. Milo, did you have a question, Milo?
So the feedback is the one that comes from the survey that then said, put a summary together, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Okay.
Christina?
So actually what I was going to say, Seth, you mentioned that you would talk offline to Lilia about that, but frankly, there's a great opportunity for any of us that are sitting in Zoom meetings to kind of use the functionality of being able to do a survey during a meeting. So I think everyone in this group could potentially benefit from you doing maybe a little tutorial on how to do that.
Oh, okay. I mean, so if you're doing a Zoom meeting, then the easiest thing to do would just to put the URL for the survey in the chat. and just have them do that right there. You can, if you want to guide them through it, you can do a screen share of the survey itself and talk them through it if they need some help. But I think Lily is talking about people who are physically in a room together. Is that right?
Yeah.
No, it's a Zoom meeting, but
It's a Zoom meeting. Okay.
Yeah, it's a Zoom meeting.
Okay, well then, yeah,
Yes.
that's how I would do it.
Oh, good. And that.
And I think anything with a chat feature, you would just you can just put the URL in a chat and say, put this in a web browser, and then you'll go to the survey.
But Lila, you were also looking for real-time results to give back.
Oh.
So I think maybe you have to make like a separate survey. It's identical questions, and you merge it later on the back end. But that way she could crank out the results.
I see. Right. I don't think I would be able to show the results to you. Yeah, if that's important, then we'll talk about it.
That's the offline part.
Thank you.
Other questions?
I have one more question. Is this exclusively for residents of Medford?
Absolutely not.
So,
no, so it's
the lead question is are you a Medford resident then?
No, it's not. It's not for Medford residents. It's for anyone who's part of the Medford community, whether you live, work, or recreate here or find other services.
It's for our daytime population, which is significantly higher than our, citizens.
Well, that's an interesting kind of shift in thinking a little bit, because could we invariably have more people that are non-residents of Medford determining who and what Medford should look like?
Seth, do you want to talk about the beginning of the survey and those questions at the beginning?
Sure. So we had, there are a lot of questions that were from the first survey that we reviewed that will also be in the second one. That will be things like, do you live, work, or find other services in Medford? And we did agree at the scope at the beginning that those are the folks that we want to try to reach, because they are part of the community, and Medford, serves their needs, and so they should be a part of this vision process. But I don't know if anyone from the core team want to address that.
You want us to address why we're including them, or what? Sorry.
Right.
Oh, well, because they're part of the community. I mean, if they come here to work, indirectly, they're paying taxes, or their employers paying taxes. They're supporting our businesses. If we want to have a healthy economy, that's a segment of the population that we can't ignore. We want them to be engaged. We want them to want to come here. It's hard. It's one of the things that we struggle with sometimes in the city government proper, is saying, where do we draw the line? And I think that's something we can do looking at a long-term vision, is that 20 years from now, most of the people impacted by this vision probably aren't even in the city today. That's part of the long-term nature of what we're trying to do. That's how I wrap my head around it.
Right. And if I might also add the fact that we are continuously talking about the fact that we have a housing issue, and there are people that are commuting to the area for work that want to live here, but maybe cannot find housing yet.
Mike?
Yeah, really what we're soliciting is input. It's information, and it's just going to inform the process. So I think Denny is right. He's raised a challenge that you always have, and you'll never escape somebody's political view. But as long as we all just view it as input, I think we're going to be fine.
And again, this isn't the type of survey that is, it's not very number heavy. So it's not a voting process where we say, we think this should happen. I'm going to be trying to be inclusive and summarizing of all unique ideas that emerge in the survey. And then it's up to the task force to decide how to use it.
Other questions on I guess we're on the talking points. We got a little sidetracked on the survey, but survey questions, talking point questions. Seth, Eric, do you want to solicit input? How do you want to solicit input on where people should be speaking at? Do you want to do that now?
Yeah.
Should people email you? What's the, you want people to drop it in the chat box. If you have an idea of a group that should have somebody speak at, even if it's not you who wants to speak there, should they drop it in the chat box right now?
I think that's a great idea. So I think just think about your network right now and some of the organizations you represent here. Who do you think you can realistically reach? And we can also, I could also bring up our audiences, but we also have a list of community groups that KJ is reviewing and working with Rachel on. And their plan is to go to you and say, like, we think you'd be a really great person to try to speak with this group. What do you think about it? And get that scheduled for you. But I would love to just hear out loud if people could talk about the type of resources they have available to try to reach people right now. And if you want to put that in the chat or describe it to us, however you're more comfortable.
Seth, I just something else came out of my mind.
Yeah.
They just had the point in time count, and a lot of the survey was done electronically, like they were carrying some like tablets or some kind of device, and the answers were on it. I'm thinking like to do, and I mentioned this at the beginning, person-to-person visits. I'm just talking about the small Latino businesses. And we had a device like that with a survey on it and have them go over the question and have them answer right there. We will have a great input from those members of the community who are small businesses.
Do you have access to an iPad or something, Lilia?
No, I don't. You do.
Yeah. Does or I mean, maybe we could talk to KJ about, I'm sure, and maybe the city can get you access to one.
I'm sure they do, but I think it would be a great and easy access because the people are so busy nowadays. They're not gonna go do the paper, the paper copy. They just, you ask the questions, they answer the questions.
Yeah, I think I'll circle back with KJ and see what kind of resources we can get you.
Okay, so ideas about speaking opportunities will go to consultant or staff. They'll get compiled, and then you'll get shamed into speaking at one of them, or we'll guilt you or something. So, questions? Yeah, Eric.
Daniel, I'd just like to suggest that that we have one point person to direct that to, and that would be Rachel, who should be on your contact list. She's coordinating the Speakers Bureau, and you can just send it directly to her, and that way we're not getting multiples.
Okay, Rachel it is. That brings us to the end of the staff portion of the agenda. We have a few extra minutes. Is there anything someone wants to bring up for the good of the order? This is the end of our second meeting. We're starting to take shape on the direction that we're going. Is there anything that you think we're missing or that needs to be brought up, or concerns that you have, comments, reflections? We'll start with Mr. Densmore.
I want to recognize my friend Alan Purdy in my remarks. I've had occasion to do a lot of things in my public life, but working with Alan, and particularly on the reconstruction of the playground at Bear Creek Park, was one of the joys of my life. And it illustrates something that I think that we need to weave into the vision statement as well. That was a project that came together that it involved raising money from the community, raising work from the community, raising expertise from the community. And it illustrates that some of our vision can be accomplished by the hands and talents of what we have in our community. And if we can somehow capture in our vision statement that we're not just looking to raise money, raise tax money, spend money on projects, but rather we're trying to build community, that I think would really help us. Because in that project, one of the things that impressed me was that there were people who didn't have two nickels to rub together who were working on the project. There were people who contribute small amounts of money. There were employers who came from outside of the city of Medford brought work crews in to help us accomplish this construction of a regional facility. And it's that kind of building community that also needs to be captured in what our vision is.
Very well said. Yes.
Thank you, Al.
Other remarks, comments, concerns? Mr. Purdy.
I've been listening intently, and I hear a lot of great stuff, and I'm definitely interested and willing to roll up my sleeves and go, and I'm all in already. But one of the things I've heard around the valley since I returned about 7 years ago, I early on got involved in the Bear Creek Greenway. I mentioned earlier in our first meeting, but I learned through that process that there had been a substantial effort put into some planning, like a vision of what the Greenway was going to be, and as I've reflected on that and some in our first meeting and looking into the future with this, I've also reflected on some conversations I've had through the chamber, and hearing that there have been things like this before, or things like the Greenway thing before, that end up on a shelf. And I know that everyone on this picture on this screen right now doesn't want to spend a whole year grinding on this to end up having a binder put on a shelf. I know I don't. And so I just want to make sure that we focus on things that we can accomplish. They can be big dreams and big goals. I'm all for that too, but I just want to make sure we keep that in mind. I don't want it put on the shelf and not implemented.
A remarkable number of committee members said that when they were approached to serve on this committee. So I don't think you're alone. I know I certainly feel that. I take it a step further, which is probably too much, but I'd like it to be, if not fiscally constrained, at least to have potential funding identified. That's what kills vision plans. Is it's the best idea in the world and there's no way to fund it. So I think what will make a successful plan is not just laying out actions, but road mapping how it can reasonably get done, and who's got, identifying partners who have the wherewithal of, not that they have to pay for it, but have a good shot of being able to get a hold of the money. So I think as we move into the tasks, and we're going to get all sorts of pie in the sky ideas, I think the real work of this committee is to put together a reasonable working document that's actually executable, not just a feel-good document. Mr. Montero, Mr. Shotun, in that order.
Yeah, I appreciate what Alan said. And so let me just give you an example. So about a dozen years ago, the ODOT's Regional Commission looked at transportation projects. And the direction that we were given was, what do we need? Not what can we pay for? What do we really need? And it got on a list, and it went in priority. And so what happened is that as funding was identified, you went down to the funding level you could afford, but you didn't ignore the project just because you couldn't pay for it. And I think that's kind of where we're headed with this, but it'll be in the strategies and the implementation that we identify potential opportunities to pay for and to execute on the plan. So I couldn't echo more what you said.
Mr. Shotun, Mr. Jensen.
Yes, I'll be quick. Alan, thank you very much. I totally agree, and I hate putting plans on the shelf. I will say one of my priorities as the city manager is getting out of 2-year thinking, because that's what our budget is. It's a biennial budget. And that's the way we've been doing things for a long time, is thinking 2 years at a time, and knowing that there are other issues out there, but we'll worry about them, 2 years from now when we do the budget. I can tell you that our council seems to be really committed now to looking further into the future and figuring out how do we do those things and have it not sit on the shelf. So thank you for saying that. And one final thing, I just want to thank all of you for being a part of this. I know today was a long meeting. We had folks that were going in and out, including myself. I apologize for that, but your commitment to this project means a great deal to myself, but also to our elected officials as well. So I know that they would thank you too.
Every time you leave the meeting unexcused, you have to do a speaking engagement. So you got a few tallied up already, Brian. So,
you know, I like to talk, Dan.
I know you do. Yeah. Eric, you're raising your hand. So.
Yes. Well, I just wanted to address the not sitting on a shelf issue, and we talked a little bit about this last time. First of all, you know, I applaud everybody who's kind of focused in on that, because that is the key to a successful vision, is actually doing it. And too many do sit on the shelf. I do feel fortunate in that the visioning processes that I've worked on have resulted in actual implementation. And Hillsborough, that I gave an example of last time, which Hillsborough 2020 that I ran, in 15 years, over 90% of the projects that they had on that list were implemented or ongoing. And so I think we can help you think about how to move this forward as we get into the action planning phase. And so I'm looking forward to doing that with you.
And Brian, no, I wasn't part of the selection, but as I understand it from what I hear, that's pretty much why we hired Eric, is because he's got a track record of delivering plans that are executable. So we're paying him the big bucks to hold us accountable through the next year to obey the document that we can actually execute on. So if it all fails, we can blame the consultant, which is what consultants exist for. So having said that, any other final words before we adjourn? Going once, going twice. We're back again. It's a little bit longer this time, March 16th at our regular time, 2 to 5 p.m. We'll have materials circulated a week before for you to review, and then we will dig into hammering out a vision statement. So it's going to start getting real. Until then, thank you, everybody. Be safe. And if you have questions, feel free to email.